In the past, when life seemed to be ending, a young beauty tried to convince her mother to let her get married. Hearing this, her brother, Cybri Crowd, and her father, Shale Crowd, were totally gobsmacked. Her mother, Riera Crowd, tired of hearing her whining, didn't understand why her daughter was so disturbed today. The eldest daughter of the Crowd clan would rather have her mother step on her than oppose such a marriage. So Riera, without hesitation, stepped on her daughter's face. And then she added another strike with her heel. Confused, Ramilla couldn't believe what had happened, as if her mother were willing to even slit her throat. In reality, for the lady, nothing was impossible. But her daughter just wanted to talk first. Recognizing her mistake, Ramilla declared her determined resolve. Since she wasn't interested in marriage or relationships before, Lord Shale was intrigued by what had suddenly happened. The protagonist had to say that she hadn't told them anything before, although she had been thinking about it for a long time. Viscount Roll is the man for whom Ramilla started this war, with family approval for their marriage. Upon waking this morning, by all signs, the girl realized she had reincarnated. Seeing the name of Viscount Roll, the wounded sword hero, on the paper, she decided she didn't want that fate. Unexpectedly, she found herself inside the universe of a popular novel she had always liked. Wounded Sword, Imperial Knights and Great Heroes. It's a novel where the main male character is Roll Arnott. The problem is that, according to internet reviews, this story is the worst of all. From the beginning, Roll's heart was shattered. He lost the ability to use both legs. He even lost his aura, losing the ability to use the sword. And then Roll stopped being a knight. He also lost his family and his home. Everything he had disappeared, after which darkness came. That was the end for Roll. In the end, he dies a miserable death. But Ramilla couldn't watch it happen. But true to his personality, if a stranger offers him help, he will refuse to be a villain. So the first thing our heroine decided was to approach Roll. They couldn't be friends, as even friendship has limits, nor partners due to the risk of breaking up. In that case, all she had left was to marry him and transform his bloody path into a path of flowers. Despite Viscount Roll's situation, Ramilla was still determined to marry him. In the original story, Roll lost a lot, but over time, the core in his heart was restored. Just at that moment, his legs obeyed him again and he began to move. Therefore, Ramilla decided to stay by his side and help him, confident that he could rise again. The girl prepared to fight to be his wife, but her mother agreed too easily. This silent consent further enraged Cybri, trying to prove that everything was futile. He tried to understand what the hell Roll did in his past life to be saddled with that crazy woman as a wife. Ramilla didn't have an easy life either, thinking that her brother was delirious about past lives, ignoring everything about them. Of course, never having met the Viscount, she wasn't sure everything would go well right away. But the girl was sure that, if she continued, transmitting the sincerity of her feelings, one day they would reach his heart. The only thing the father hoped for was that his eldest daughter would move to the Viscount's house if the wedding negotiations materialized. However, Ramilla planned to convince her future husband to come here. For Roll, devastated by living in the capital, there was no better place to take care of his body and soul than this one. At the Arnon mansion, although there was still time according to the contract, the servants were summoned to thank them. It might be awkward, but still, the gentleman thought it was better to say it face to face. It was the first time the servant heard about any discomfort, as they all respected the Viscount so much. Lord Roll was grateful, although he didn't know how to respect such an incompetent boss as himself. Thanks to Jack's effort, visiting the library became a real pleasure. Every time the gentleman saw the garden cared for by Chris, he felt wonderful emotions. The food prepared by Junie made Roll look forward to lunchtime. If the Viscount could, he would pat his own relative on the shoulder. He decided to take a break. After all, no one else would come. At that moment, the young Ramilla arrived at the Arnon Duchy, hoping to meet the Viscount. Seeing Roll with her own eyes, she almost went crazy seeing the handsome hero of the novel made reality. Introducing herself as Ramilla Kraut, the girl tried to remain calm, although inside it was raining heavily. His question about the reason for the visit was expected by Ramilla. She had something to offer him. Kneeling before the gentleman, the heroine extended her hand and proposed sealing their first meeting with a marriage. Instantly sensing the atmosphere preceding a rejection, she urgently decided to activate Plan B. Then, Miss Ramilla demonstrated all her skills, proving her belonging to a family of knights. And of course, she is also a knight. That's why she admired Lord Roll, her fellow knight. Appealing to belonging to a lineage of knights, The plan was to confess that she had been observing him. Speaking of nights, the Viscount once again sowed darkness. The truth is that he could no longer hold a sword. He also doesn't know this girl very well. Regardless of the reason for the proposal, the situation is too sudden. To be honest, Ramilla knew what kind of person Roll was in his past life. But now he is not the same Roll. To fix everything, she offered her apologies to the gentleman for not having considered his feelings. However, Roll himself felt remorse, as the girl had made him a proposal in such good faith. The protagonist understood him perfectly. In fact, she never planned to succeed on the first try. None of the servants imagined that Ramilla would return so calmly. She would continue visiting the master. The courtiers arrived just in time when the lady wanted to talk to them. There is a limit to how much she can plan in her mind, so she urgently needed help. Ramilla sought advice. What should she do for Lord Roll to agree? First, the young man suggested appealing to the lady's power, which she flatly refused. Secondly, another servant thought it was a good idea to bribe him with money, which was impossible. So the last option remained, obtaining the Duke's consent using her looks and Ramilla's beauty. Meanwhile, Vincent's investigation was yielding no results. It had a low success rate from the start. The doctor informed him that the suspicious subjects he mentioned earlier had reappeared. After announcing the end of the investigation, they felt palpable relief. When mentioning a lady's visit to Roll, he revealed it was Ramilla from the Crowd County. Although the lady came to propose marriage, the Viscount refused, but after being praised as a knight, he felt like an insignificant guy. Although the doctor denied it, Roll has so many debts that his wife would not be happy. Looking out the window, the doctor saw that, unlike the gentleman, Lady Ramilla would not give up easily. Ramilla Crowd returned to the Arnon mansion, and this time she came determined. Preparing in advance, today she came to propose marriage to the man of her dreams. As the Viscount had said before, it was their first meeting, but this time it was official. Of course, the heroine allowed him to refuse her today too. She was not looking for a forced marriage. Even though the master refused again, Ramilla was not too discouraged. She had another objective. Still, she felt a little sorry, so she asked permission to see the mansion and the architecture of the capital. In particular, those roof angles are charming and the distinctive touch of capital architecture. Preferring to enjoy art and creativity alone, Ramilla wanted to explore the mansion by herself. Afterward, she went up to the second floor, just as planned, hoping to run into that child. According to the plan, the girl had to approach people close to the Viscount, his family, or friends. As far as she knew, he had no family other than his younger sister. While the protagonist was thinking about how to go back and replan everything, she suddenly bumped into a little girl in the hallway. Seeing the younger sister herself, Ramilla could hardly believe she had managed to find her so quickly. The little girl noticed that the lady felt unwell, to the point of falling, so she dragged her to rest. The mission was a success. Our heroine managed to enter Army Arnon's room. So, to start, she explained that her visit was to greet the honorable knight. Hearing this, Army's eyes filled with tears, sadly recalling that her brother hadn't wielded a sword in a long time. The little girl loved her brother simply because he had always been kind to her. Even when the people working here make mistakes, Ruel smiles and doesn't get angry. Army's brother tries to help anyone who is going through a hard time. It was enough for the girl that he grieved alongside those who were going through hard times. Everything the little girl had said before was the reason why Ramilla respected Lord Roll. When they settled down and continued the conversation, the heroine noticed an etiquette book in the girl's hands. In reality, Miss Arnon often skimmed it because she didn't understand what it was about. Out of courtesy, Ramilla offered her help, promising to come and teach the girl etiquette. They sealed the agreement with pinky swears, and suddenly, Lady Cron set the date for her next visit. Thanks to this pink, cute, and adorable little girl, she is a little closer to achieving the Flower Path plan for the hero role. 5 years ago, when Roll was a centurion, he was assigned responsibility for actions in battle. When the siege ended, the soldiers found one survivor, a girl, the only one left alive in the village. In that situation, Officer Roll ordered the girl to be taken to the survivor camp. However, they informed him that there was no space, so the order came from above to simply ignore the survivors. A noble knight, who suddenly wanted to know if the officer knew her, offered to take the girl to the camp. Furthermore, his lordship did not expect to find a monster boy here, capable of eliminating dozens daily. Upon learning that Roll had killed about 20 today, the knight wanted to claim his achievement. promising in return to take the girl. Disappointment and surprise flooded the hero's eyes. He couldn't believe he was a noble knight. The centurion proved to be smarter than the master thought, and Roll accepted the deal. At the cost of losing achievements earned through sweat and blood, he saved the life of an innocent child. That same day, Army told her brother that she met Lady Ramillet and praised her beauty. According to her, the guest greatly respects Lord Roll and wouldn't stop talking about his virtues. And another reason for Army's enthusiasm was that Lady Ramillet offered to help her with her etiquette book. Lord Roll refused the marriage proposal twice, so he decided to give his consent. However, his sister worried about his well-being and was even willing to refuse. Perhaps it is because he went through battlefields and lived in camps that he knows how to read negative emotions too. Since Army is from a commoner family, she couldn't associate with the children of noble families. Because of Roll's title, the Viscount, she couldn't even talk to commoner children. Therefore, the girl spends all her time reading books in solitude. Lady Ramillet could be a friend for Army. Surely she hasn't had one in a long time. Although Roll was surprised that the girl proposed to him, he was glad his sister met someone good. He perfectly understood that, most likely, the little one would be very upset if he didn't allow it. Training with Carol, the protagonist had a lot of fun, unlike the poor maid. However, everything the maid had taught her seemed insufficient and required urgent learning. Ramillet attended etiquette classes for 3 days, but according to Carol, anyone who saw her would say she only studied for 1. It only took 30 minutes, and in those 30 minutes the lady couldn't even concentrate. But that wasn't that important to her. What really mattered to her was the marriage. Just as Ramillet decided to run away, she bumped head-on into some strangers, concealing their faces under a dark robe. Those guys knew her name, but they didn't look like common people. Without using force, they kindly asked Ramillet crowd to leave the capital. But if the girl dared to refuse, the mysterious man would have no choice but to draw his sword. These words would sound more terrifying to the heroine if she wasn't sure that the fun had begun. Hearing the pathetic cries for help a moment later, the girl hoped they wouldn't have any more questions. With her strength, the fragile warrior maiden forced them to crawl and beg for forgiveness on their knees. In case they didn't tell her who sent them, Ramillet was going to destroy them again. However, the light kicks and soft blows were not working. Even without the robes, the guys insisted they knew nothing. Not understanding why they accepted that job if they knew nothing, the girl decided to start with their fingers. But when one confessed it was for money, it became clear they were the same as the servants. In that case, the heroine also wanted to make a request, offering something valuable as payment. After receiving the gem, Garin and his partner agreed to be her servants and fulfill any wish. Despite Carol's displeasure, she now cared if someone was interested in Roll. To the maid, everything seemed like a threat from a lady in love with the master. But that was not in the original story. Moreover, Army said they hadn't had visitors in a long time. In that case, Ramillet decided to find out tomorrow if Lord Roll had a secret lover. But upon seeing him, she didn't miss the opportunity to ask if he was willing to accept her offer. Although it seemed to the hero that the bouquet was growing, he was forced to refuse her. However, Roll's reaction was strangely softer than before. After 3 rejections, Ramillet saw the ideal moment to ask him if he was dating anyone else. She thought that if he already had a beloved, it would be awkward to receive proposals all the time. He didn't hide that he wasn't involved with anyone, besides never having dated anyone. Suddenly, he bowed and thanked Lady Ramillet for teaching etiquette to his sister. She meant to say she had already eaten, but she came on an empty stomach and wanted her first meal with him. Faced with this, the Viscount proposed dinner, and the girl nodded her head 100 times. For the first time, he smiled broadly. There is something truly unusual about Lady Ramillet. Being at the table with the protagonist and his sister was an opportunity to score points. Lady Crowd decided to give the girl an etiquette lesson, starting with how to sit. She indicated to sit to the right of the chair and stand up on the left, although others seemed to think it was the other way around. Realizing her mistake, Ramillet quickly claimed she did it on purpose to test Army. The rest of the class seemed like a test where the girl pretended not to know anything about etiquette. But when Lord Roll ordered her to stop, her breath caught and it seemed like he had discovered her. In reality, he was just worried that the lady hadn't eaten, but the heroine was happy and safe. Soon, Fidel visited Lord Viscount. It had been a long time since they saw each other. He arrived unexpectedly to deliver Captain Roll's resignation request, entrusted by Viscount Orme. The good thing is that national defenders can receive a pension upon retirement. Roll was hearing this for the first time, although he was sure his superiors knew about his situation. After asking the captain not to worry, Fidel, as a treasury employee, promised to sort out the finances. As for his previous job, the workload increased considerably after Lord Royal left. As soon as something happened, they were sent there, but they weren't the only knights in the empire. If commoner knights were dismissed, the leadership would be criticized, so it was rumored they were sending people to die. Consequently, Fidel had no choice but to change jobs to survive. However, there is good news. He recently got married in his hometown and now has a wife. Roll immediately knew he had married Kay, as they were always together. It would be strange not to know. Although they were always together, Fidel constantly received beatings. As for Roll, he had no news, although for some reason the image of Lady Ramal came to his mind. A strange confusion appeared on his face, and his eyes began to move playfully, as if looking for a distraction. Before noticing this, Fidel just laughed and continued the conversation. But today the captain seemed suspicious. Since the gentleman is here for work, he couldn't have private conversations. But next time, he definitely wanted an answer. And then, without hesitation, they got to work, reviewing every document. It seemed that the captain's financial situation was stable, but the truth was different. Fidel wondered how the gentleman had endured being alone for so long, and in that condition, determined that Roll shouldn't bear everything alone, the gentleman wanted to give him at least a little power. The financial situation was critical, but the Viscount found someone willing to help. He longed for the moment when he could fully trust that person. A letter soon arrived from Fidel, confirming that collecting the salary was more difficult than expected. Even when asking his boss for the reason, he only repeated that the deputy minister refused. The strange thing is that not even Fidel's boss understood the deputy minister's decision. It hurt to give this news to the captain, although Roll knew no one in the Ministry of Finance. The news was a crushing blow to the Viscount. He felt like a burden to everyone. The damaged core did not improve, and all hope had completely vanished. If only he could use his aura, but it was absurd to expect a miracle. At that moment, the door burst open, letting the wind in. Ramilla burst in shouting, but froze instantly, noticing the strange atmosphere surrounding the Viscount. Seeing his battle sword, she knew something was very wrong. Nothing would scare her, so Rami let go without further ado that she was proposing marriage again. Roll rejected her again, but today his mood was gloomy, as if something terrible had happened. Although he insisted everything was fine, she imagined 1,000 stories with that face. She couldn't insist further, so she changed the subject and talked about the good weather. It was the perfect moment to suggest a sunny walk with Army to the master, but Roll refused again due to his unfinished business. How strange. He suggested to the girl that she take a walk with Army, and that's when I knew something was wrong with him. When they saw each other, the girl celebrated the walk, but she wanted her brother to come out. It would do him good. This morning, the girl delivered a letter from her brother's friend, and he smiled upon seeing the name. When she heard the sender was Fidel, Ramilla instantly remembered he was Roll's comrade. If the letter is from Fidel, it might be time to receive his pay. Although the reason why the deputy minister refuses to give him his pay is a mystery. Even in the novel, information about finances was quite scarce. Putting her thoughts aside, Lady Ramilla decided to ask Army where she wanted to go. It turns out the place the girl wants to go to is the theater. But now that she has thought it over, it seems she doesn't want to go anymore. Suddenly, Army saw a sign pointing to a park and said she wanted to go there. From her expression, Ramilla intuited that the sign worried her. However, the girl made an effort to show that she never wanted to see a popular play like White Flowers at the Temple. This greatly disappointed Lady Crowd. She loves parks, but hated seeing her alone. And she was happy when her sister mentioned the theater. Ramilla thought she had finally found someone who liked theaters, but she realized it was just her imagination. In that case, Army felt a little awkward, but suggested going to the theater. Then, for accompanying her, the protagonist promised to let her choose the play. Meanwhile, the Viscount's mansion was chaos. Roll couldn't process the news. Shortly after the play, the girls went to a cafe. The play was better than expected, especially the scene where the protagonist was miraculously cured. It was the best. It was a play where the protagonist overcame an incurable disease. Ramilla assumed that Army, upon seeing the protagonist, was imagining Roll. Thinking about it, the girl was already here with her brother. something that was not mentioned in the original story. For her, who was visiting the capital for the first time, Roll showed her the city and they walked together. Army tried many new things. There were so many amazing things. Afterward, they decided to see the play. And the girl still couldn't believe her brother couldn't walk anymore. But Ramilla was sure he would recover. That event is the most important thing in this novel. Despite everything, the little one remained worried. Her brother looked very downcast. Everything was going well when he was investigating with Viscount Orm. But little by little, he was getting weaker. The only thing little Army asked was for Ramilla to visit her more often in the capital. With her arrival, Roll's routine, always the same, seems to have changed a little bit. The heroine doubted if she was doing right, but she never imagined the girl thought that. She agreed only if the little one chose any dresses she wanted at the boutique. It was Carol's idea, who insisted that the clothes must be memorable. So every time Army wore the gifted clothes, she would remember Lady Ramilla. And also, Lord Roll would also think of her when seeing the clothes. Army feared it would be too expensive. She didn't know how to obtain something like that. Since they made a deal, and the heroine always keeps her word, she decided to buy at least 4 dresses. The little girl tried to stop her with all her might, but the lady managed to get at least 3 dresses. In reality, the girl was very grateful and promised to take good care of the clothes. Lady Ramilla gave her a note with the address of her residence. Of course, young Miss Arnon could now contact her at any time. Without feeling pressured, most likely, a moment will come when she really needs help. So, Army returned home with gifts, but her brother didn't greet her at the door. He usually always comes out to greet her, so she decided to go to his study herself. Immediately, memories flooded her mind upon entering her brother's. When he demanded that Orm be called, Lord Roll was desperate. Tears streamed down his cheeks. He hasn't felt his legs since that day. It has happened before, and Armin wouldn't bear it if something like that happened again. Remembering Lady Rammel's words, she didn't want to think about a bad and depressing past. With the thought that her brother would recover, the girl ran into the study with a joyful cry. What a relief it was to see her brother in front of her, just as she had always known him. But as she approached, she noticed his hair was messy and his clothes wrinkled. It was obvious that, after that incident, his brother drank in secret, and today everything could repeat itself. Roll explained his flushed face, saying it was probably too hot in the room, but it was the first time he had seen Army in such a beautiful outfit, which suited her wonderfully. Then, the girl told everything that had happened with Lady Rammel. Sure that her brother would be happy. Extending her pinky to her brother, the little girl wanted him to promise that next time they would all go together. Roll couldn't tell the whole truth at that moment, so he swore and they sealed their pinkies. The gentleman could only breathe a sigh of relief after the girl went to sleep. Suddenly, a hidden bottle of alcohol fell to the floor, fortunately without his sister seeing it. At that moment, the gentleman felt truly insignificant. The next morning, Ramilla only woke up because Carol promised to send Garan back. After quickly getting ready, they went to meet that guy who tried to intimidate the young woman. It turned out he did everything he could, but failed to find the person he was looking for. Half of his face was covered, so the young man couldn't find anything. Anger overtook Ramilla upon realizing that idiot hadn't found anything. However, she felt a little better knowing that Garan had found something interesting instead. A short while before, waiting for the client, Garan and his partner feared for their lives. Upon meeting, they had to admit they had failed the mission. The victim's skills were much better than expected. Not even 2 were enough. As the client requested, the mercenaries threatened. But when Garan drew his sword, the girl changed. The reaction speed was instantaneous. Perfect evasion technique, continuing to fight meant death. It seemed strange to the client, as he had heard the girl was lazy and skipped training. Anyway, he asked the guys to act like nothing had happened. Before leaving, he reminded them what would happen if the details came to light. As soon as the gentleman left, the mercenaries tracked him, looking for his rotten meat smell. This man met another one. Since both wore hoods, it was obvious they were a group. Thus, the guys arrived at the door where the 2 mysterious subjects were hiding. They had no choice but to use the listening artifact. Curiosity was too much. At the meeting, the man in the black hood reported that they couldn't scare away the Cloud Lady. He wanted a chance to prove his worth, but the boss was not in the mood. Suddenly, silence invaded the room beyond the wall, and Garan began to get nervous. When the Wanderer opened the door, no one was there. He thought it had all been his imagination. For Ramilla, the strange thing was that in the end, they mentioned what to do with Fidel. Do they want to eliminate them? They both help Roll, and they could be crucial in the future. In other words, the one who tried to expel the heroine dislikes Viscount role. Garan hesitated whether to continue investigating the Black Hood, fearing getting into trouble. Convinced that the Black Cloak would harm Roll, the heroine wanted to anticipate his next move. Paying with another gem, she requested information about who sent the Black Cloak. Apparently, this individual is more dangerous than Ramilla imagined. The next day, the girl decided to investigate if these people held a grudge against Roll. Obviously, although he is an Empire hero, from the enemy's perspective, he is a battlefield demon. Ramilla believed it too, but she didn't understand why they preferred to threaten her instead of assassinating him. According to her servant, the reason was that the job would become too cumbersome. For example, if Roll dies and it is discovered that the North is behind it, public opinion about the North would worsen. And the worst possible scenario is a war that could break out. The young man was sure that if nothing happened to Lord Roll, the Imperial Palace would handle the matter. After hearing that, Ramilla understood that, instead of killing them, it was better to eliminate them so they wouldn't reappear. It is better to stop those people now, so they don't have the chance to achieve what they want. But immense power could pressure Roll, and the heroine didn't know if they could prevent it. Carol suddenly became curious. Had the lady forgotten to go and propose marriage to the Viscount? Ramilla would rather find out some information, being aware that it is actually a mysterious power. This problem will be easily solved as soon as she marries Roll, because the Crowd family can protect him. They said that if a proposal was rejected more than 3 times, it was considered humiliating. Without losing hope, the heroine never imagined she would have to make so many marriage proposals. However, every time she received a rejection, she became more determined, because the girl believed that Lord Roll was truly a good person. Although it is hard to explain in words, she thought that if she married him, her days would be happier and brighter. However, the Viscount didn't understand it, and it seemed that everything was a game played by a girl in love to him. Nonetheless, knowing the original novel, the protagonist knew the gentleman like no one else ever would. But between the two of them, there was still an enormous abyss. It was difficult to do anything about it, since Ruel's point of view differed greatly from Ramirs's. Suddenly, the girl decided to visit Army and asked her brother for permission. Bowing, Roll thanked her for the clothes she had gifted him. He couldn't stay still, wiggling his fingers as if trying to say something. But at that moment, the protagonist, very nervous, escaped, saying goodbye and that it was time to leave. The Viscount was surrounded by loneliness again, and he wanted to invite her to go together next time. No matter how much he thought about her, he knew that Miss Ramilla was too good for him. When he finally went up to the 2nd floor, he found Army reading books. The little girl was happy to see her. However, the little girl hadn't worn the gifted clothes. She felt sorry to wear them around the house. In that case, Lady Crowd said it was one of the etiquette rules to wear what you are gifted. Now the little girl was learning, completing several math tasks. She had acquired a lot of knowledge, thanks to the help of her brother and Baron Dallas. That name sounded so familiar to Ramilla. Surely he was in the novel. But she didn't remember to whom he belonged. According to Army, this month he hadn't come yet, as he was busy with his store. Since that job was in a store, that suggested that man was surely a merchant. Anyway, the protagonist remembered little. She was going to check for herself if he was an enemy. Army even pointed out on the map and marked where the Baron's store was. So as not to raise suspicion, Ramilla said she also had a huge interest in mathematics, and that she would love to talk to Baron Dallas about mathematics. The little girl was enthusiastic that Lady M knew etiquette well and was so interested in mathematics. In that case, the heroine urgently ran towards Baron Dallas, saying goodbye until soon. In the eyes of young Miss Arnon, this lady was truly a person with great passion for learning. Upon meeting Carol, the heroine immediately communicated the need to meet someone. The maid guessed it was another operation and asked what the lady wished to buy. It turns out that Baron Dallas's name often appears in the newspapers. He is a real celebrity who managed to sell out his self-help book. According to Carol, he sells everything: clothes, accessories, food, and even weapons. In Rome, the Baron was a merchant who trafficked weapons with Roll. But there was definitely something more. Once Ramilla arrived at the location, she hoped the correct answer would appear when they met. After many attempts to enter, no one opened the door. But the heroine could hear that there was someone inside. If you look closely, you can see that the door is broken. Someone clearly forced it and entered. Just in case, the girl ordered Carol to call the knights, and then bravely burst into the mansion. It turned out there was no one inside. In that case, she decided to check the second floor. After knocking on the second floor door, Raymilla apologized and entered, as if not even looking around. At that moment, a man attacked from the corner, but the girl instantly drew her sword and blocked the blow. It was cowardly to attack while hiding, and as expected, the attacker was yesterday's Black Hood. The gentleman, whose name was apparently Baron Dallas, was unconscious. The question now was what they knew about each other. But the crucial thing is that Black Hood was not a woman. Surprisingly, the heroine dodged his blows effortlessly, and even asked who ordered him to do that. If Black Hood wasn't going to speak clearly, this wasn't going to end with simple blows. Raymilla only wanted to know if the gentleman knew the reason why she had wielded the sword. Suddenly, her attention was caught by the Baron. His condition worsened, and crimson blood spurted from his mouth. Seizing the moment, Black Hood broke free and jumped out the window, trying to escape. Chasing him, the girl could have caught him, but the Baron could be in even greater danger now. Two equally important paths made her suffer from indecision. Who to choose first? Deciding to capture the attacker later, the heroine desperately ran to save the Baron. She found no serious injuries, but his pale face indicated an attempt at poisoning. With a hard blow, the young woman began hitting the gentleman's back to wake him up, and spit out the poison. At that moment, the Baron opened his eyes and said it hurt, which almost made the heroine faint. He tried to say that Black Hood had stolen what was kept in the secret safe. Before the Baron revealed what was stolen, his face suddenly paled, and he lost consciousness. 2 days later, the protagonist couldn't understand why she was being questioned as a suspect. After all, she found the victim and the criminal with him, and she also worked hard for 2 days. Thanks to her, the Baron recovered quickly and overcame the problem, although he still hadn't regained consciousness. If Raymilla hadn't gone to look for the Baron or hadn't chased Black Hood, Baron Dallas would be dead. She thought about it during the investigation. She, Fidel, and Dallas have one thing in common above all else. These people are linked to Sir Roll. All this time, they have been threatening or harming those close to him. But there is another person connected to Roll, someone who helps him with the investigation of his ailment. If the predictions are correct, the next person in danger is Viscount Orm. In the original story, it was said that one day he suddenly disappeared. Now that I think about it, how strange. In that case, Seaton and Mark were ordered to protect Viscount Orm, who communicated most with Roll. Raymilla was somewhat nervous during the interrogation, and she thought that was why she was feeling sleepy. She dreamed of catching the Black Hood. Surely he stole something important from the Baron. And until Lord Dallant wakes up, all she can do is wait to know exactly what it was. Meanwhile, Lord Orm was trying to find the correct papers, wasting time in vain. Since everything was already stolen, being in his empty laboratory, he suddenly heard a strange sound coming from outside. Suddenly, the doors burst open, and 2 strangers rushed in, concealing their faces under black hoods. In a panic, Orm couldn't help but notice that they had sent bandits before. But this time they came themselves. He only demanded to know the reason why they insisted on stopping the investigation. Of course, for the people of the Black Hood clan, the reason is that bastard Roll. The instant the attacker charged, the Knights of the Crowd family burst into the laboratory, shouting and ready to defend. Receiving orders from their lady, the brave Mark and Sitten complied without hesitation, forming a defense line. For Lord Orm's peace of mind, Mark declared that they came on the orders of Lady Ramelia. Mastering the art of combat, the boys fought desperately, but resisting the enemy's strength was difficult. At one point, feeling completely exhausted, Mark dropped his guard and took a brutal blow. Following him, Seaton also fell. The young man felt as if several powerful blows had hit his chest. The situation was critical. 2 mysterious hooded figures arrived to help the clan. The clan leader gathered the commoners and ordered the rest to take care of them. However, the clan worried that the Crowd family might intervene in the assassination. Despite everything, the ringleader thought it was better not to leave any evidence. Suddenly, a stone flew from outside. Lady Ramilla couldn't sleep. She only sent 2 knights, but now, seeing the situation with her own eyes, she decided to find out if she should intervene. The girl seemed too relaxed, even with the enemy in front of her. Allowing one to attack, in case of defeat, she ordered them to kneel and tell everything. And furthermore, Ramilla asked them to remember that if they remained silent, they wouldn't escape her beating. Sensing the first and pathetic attempt at attack, the girl instantly used her sword aura. Seeing how she uses the aura, the one in the black cloak forbade his men from attacking. Seeing the brutal potential of the Crowd warrior, They should not forget she could beat them to a pulp. At that instant, everyone attacked, but it seemed boring to the girl to repeat it for the third time. The unstoppable power of Ramel's magic sword unleashed a torrent of mana upon the enemy. She didn't imagine these guys would be so weak as to not even stop the aura. After taking care of the main issue, it was time to find out the Viscount's condition. Orm was perplexed to learn that the lady had knocked everyone unconscious to buy time. However, after examining the attackers, Seaton regretfully reported that everyone was dead. Ramel's blow wasn't strong enough to kill them. In fact, it was like what happened to Dallas. Judging by their skin color, it seems these guys drank poison beforehand. Lately, this method has been used by members of the Assassin's Guild. Impregnated with poison, they only receive the antidote if the mission is a success. Above all, the Viscount's health was paramount, so they had to return as soon as possible. Although late, Viscount Orm thanked the lady and her knights for the rescue. He was intrigued how Lady Ramilla knew Black Hood would look for him in his laboratory. Through Army, the heroine learned that the Viscount was close to Sir Roll. Recently, Baron Dallas was also ambushed by Black Hood, who stole items from his safe. Of course, it's just speculation, but Ramilla believed they were trying to isolate Roll by attacking his close circle. Now that Orm thought about it, he remembered those subjects mentioned Sir Roll before attacking him. Therefore, they were trying to control his investigation, so it wouldn't aid Sir Roll's recovery. Thinking about what was stolen from the safe, Orm became suspicious and decided to go straight to the master. If his conjectures were correct, it was most likely the deed to the Arnon mansion. In other words, those bastards planned to threaten Lord Royal with the house document. The problem was that Baron Dallas, who could testify that the documents were stolen, was unconscious. Under such circumstances, Lord Roll would have no choice but to do whatever they told him. And no matter how much he begged those people, they would kick him out, just like in the original story. Besides, Lord Orm decided to ask if Ramiel had really come to the capital to propose marriage. Upon confirmation, he eagerly hoped the lady would approach Lord Roll and marry him. He was convinced that the only one who could save Roll from danger was Lady Ramiel. In the middle of the conversation, an urgent message arrived from Viscount Roll's mansion. Upon opening the letter, the heroine held her breath, feeling a knot of anger growing inside her. Those cruel ones must have arrived, because in the letter Army begged desperately for help. Without hesitation, the heroine left for the mansion. Little Army was terribly frightened. She didn't know what was happening behind the closed door of her brother's study, from where a crash was coming. Before acting, Ramilla ordered the maids to take Armia to her room, to the safe place. With her hand on her heart, she promised that everything would be fine. Her sister would solve everything. According to the maid, some bandits suddenly broke in and caused damage, demanding they leave the mansion. Upon hearing that Roll had called the bandits into the study, the heroine prepared to resolve it immediately. Upon entering, the first thing she saw was her master, defenseless, surrounded by those brutal attackers. In a panic, the young woman ran to him to make sure he was fine. Her naive eyes, flooded with tears, glimpsed a final glimmer of hope at that instant. Upon seeing the stranger, the enraged bandit grabbed her by the shoulder and demanded she identify herself. But Ramilla, without hesitation, grabbed his hand and fractured it up to the first bone crunch. With a single blow, she managed to knock down that bastard, feeling the bandit's legs tremble. After him, the second bandit also fell unconscious, leaving only the last one, who decided to apologize. Apologizing was too late. The furious warrior couldn't control her intention to kill them. At the last moment, Lord Orm stopped her, although he considered that enough choice had been made. Because Lord Roll was still there, upset and full of anguish over everything that had happened. After all, the bandits confessed that they had been tricked, lured by a free house, and stolen bonuses. Barely restraining herself from killing them, Ramilla sentenced that the apologies should be directed to Roll. These guys were saved from jail. They were lucky, their limbs remained intact. After apologizing for going too far, Ramilla thought they were people trying to kill Roll. And the reason for this was that an assassin had attacked Viscount Orm today. Furthermore, a few days ago Baron Dallas had also suffered harm. Upon learning the whole truth, Viscount Orm couldn't express how grateful he was for her help. If it weren't for Lady Ramilla, he wouldn't have even known the truth and the reason why he was kicked out of the house. In that case, the heroine thought it wasn't too late to ask him to accept her marriage proposal this time. She sincerely believed that it was too dangerous for Lord Roll to stay here now. However, the gentleman preferred to be alone, as the Crowd estate would become dangerous in the future. Without offering marriage out of interest, the girl didn't understand why he thought they would suffer losses because of her. Even Orm assured that this marriage was not a loss for the Crowds. It is glory and an advantage to have such a famous hero of the empire as Roll. If he felt overwhelmed, he could think of it as an investment. That would save him. Roll just wanted time to think. Although, of course, Ramilia knew how to wait. From now on, enemies will attack Roll relentlessly. Keep that in mind. Staying in the capital is too dangerous for Lady Army and for Roll. It seemed that Ramilia proposed marriage because she was madly in love. But if that favor fades away, he doesn't know what his fate will be. It is a marriage based on Lady Ramilia's favor, but she could get tired and ask for a divorce. Then he will have no rights or reasons to object. He will be thrown out onto the street. But even so, Orm wanted them to get married. Not knowing how long this marriage will last, Roll needs an umbrella to protect himself from the storm. Deciding to tell Army the same thing, the master first wanted to know her opinion about Lady Ramilla. The little girl thought the lady was a great and very nice person. That's why she was ecstatic to learn that the lady had proposed marriage to her brother. She really liked this news, as both were good people to her. And if two such bright people are together, it will be wonderful, although perhaps not. If this marriage goes through, it is very likely that the Arnon family will join the Kraut family. Many difficulties could arise if the people of the Kraut family resemble the nobles of the past. Assuring that everything will be fine, Arnie understood what worried her little brother, and she was going to do everything to look good in front of the adults. After hearing this, Roll regretted having raised a girl who says such things. Upon meeting Ramilla, Lord Orm reported that Roll feared separation due to his inexperience. In reality, the heroine took it lightly, skipping dates and proposing marriage directly. Peeking into the room, Arm said her brother wanted to speak privately with the lady. On the way, Miss Crowd tried not to get nervous, hoping that this time he would accept. But she didn't expect Roll to agree to be her partner so easily, promising to do his best. Finally, Roll and she were a couple. Ramilla was also ready to be a good partner. It might sound cheeky, but the gentleman wanted to set his conditions for the marriage. One condition from the Viscount was that she would be responsible for Army if he left Kraut. Even if he separated from Army, the master preferred her to be safe. Of course, this was not a problem for the heroine, and she accepted the conditions without hesitation. She promised to add her own conditions later, when she returned. For now, the girl only wanted Roll to take care of her in the future, just as he desired the same. Soon the day arrived when both heroes would finally return to Kraut. Ramilla looked forward to this moment more than anything. However, upon meeting Master Roll, her expectations collapsed when she saw him in a bad mood. The master thought the house was empty because no one was living there, and he apologized for having to hurry. Army left with Carol, so it was time for them to leave too. It seems Roll is very attached to the mansion. This place was a gift from the imperial family. Since it was her first home, Ramilla suggested they not rush and look around carefully. Now that she thought about it, she realized many things had happened here. For example, the girl proposed marriage to him on the first day of her arrival. And countless times, she proposed marriage in the following days. It was here that she first met Army, and she made mistakes at the table. The protagonist also managed to see a devastated Roll, something she only imagined. Just as Ramilla promised upon arriving in this world, she would help Roll have a good ending. After reviewing some memories, the master was ready to leave. His flowery path was just beginning. However, on the street, they witnessed two people harassing poor Carol. Unlike Kai, the former member of the night squad was worried about Roll marrying that lady. Kai came because he heard Master Roll was leaving the capital. In reality, thinking they both had bad luck, the Viscount explained a couple of simple reasons. Upon hearing how many dangerous things had happened in such a short time, Fidel became very indignant. Fortunately, nothing happened to them. They were simply transferred to a new division. Since his boss kept talking nonsense, Fidel went directly to the deputy minister and grabbed him by the neck a little. The next day, his desk was gone. For some reason, they forced him to do all the remaining work. Then, the gentleman received a sudden offer to join the cavalry of the Kraut family. Ramilla suggested that both Viscount Ormu and Baron Dallas also go to Kraut for their own safety. After Baron Dallas recovers, Kai and Fidel promised to go together. Soon the carriage arrived. However, there was no low-platform vehicle, as the lady had requested. Promising to take care of that after arriving at Kraut, the heroine bravely picked up Roll in her arms and decided to carry him. The girl apologized profusely for this, but it was the only way she could think of. If you think about it, now she can hug Roll at least twice every time they travel by carriage. The rest of the time, the heroes traveled in the carriage. They didn't have much time left to reach the Crowd mansion. Noticing Roll's great worry, Ramilla decided that he was distressed about his family. Suddenly, the carriage stopped, and as soon as the milady got out, the butler announced that someone had arrived. Sibri, who suddenly appeared, was very curious how his sister could have proposed to the master. It seemed the little brother didn't see her beauty. It was precisely with her that the girl was able to make the proposal. First impressions were important for the Kraut family, and as their representative, Sibri came in person to meet him. Peering into the carriage, the young man introduced himself as the person assigned to accompany Master Roll. For him, it is a great honor to meet a person like Roll Arnon. It turns out the Viscount noticed the great resemblance between her and his sister. Sensing the carriage slowing down, Army got scared and ran out to see what was happening. Sibri recognized her as Lord Roll's younger sister and asked her to call him brother. Inside the Roll mansion, anxiety grew about how the head of the crowd would receive them, and if he would be kind. It was evident at first sight that the lady and the gentleman were not common people. The Shield of the West, Shale Crowd, and the Spear of the West, Riera Crowd, received the new guests with honors. Despite his noticeable nervousness, Roll Arnon stood firm and greeted his wife's parents. Accompanying him was his sister, Lady Army Arnon. Lady Riera, of course, had heard that the gentleman had a younger sister, but this was unexpected for her. At that moment, Ramilla burst into the room, shouting for her mother to leave alone those who were too tired. She suggested to her mother to ask everything tomorrow and rest a little today. However, malice appeared on the lady's face. She didn't understand why she should stop. Trembling with fear before his greatness, Roll apologized for not teaching his sister how to greet properly. Not understanding why everyone reacted this way, Riera only wanted to say that Army was cuter than she thought. Throughout the meal, Mrs. Riera and Sir Chale took care of the girl as if she were their own daughter. Although there was a recent misunderstanding, Sir Roll was grateful to Ramilla for supporting his sister. Taking the opportunity to score points, the heroine said she didn't need thanks, because she considered Army her family, a family united by law, so that the young woman would never be separated from the Viscount. Suddenly, the father remembered the marriage vow ceremony and suggested celebrating it in the morning. The next day, Ramilla met her fiancé early, presenting herself to him in a new look. Lord Roll blushed at her stunning beauty, but managed to compliment her. Primarily, he wanted to know what the Kraut family's marriage vow rite was. Opening the doors of the dark basement, the heroine promised to explain after going down. Although Roll was going to ask for help to go down, Ramilla reminded him of his position as a Crowd knight. In training, he lifts about 200 kilos, so she asked her fiancé to trust her. Realizing the danger, the girl understood why the protagonists restrained themselves so much. But she kept going down, pushing away those terrifying thoughts. Suddenly, she slipped. Ramilla tumbled down and barely managed to save Roll. That way was better. They reached the bottom quickly, and the girl sat the gentleman back in the chair. Luckily, the Viscount is fine, but he didn't know there was such a large underground cave. The first count, founder of the Kraut family, was responsible for the feudal rebellion. In vassals, it is said that he moved a lot due to attacks from neighboring countries and pressure from the imperial family. It is rumored that the count, betrayed by vassals he trusted, took refuge in this underground cave. It is obvious that future generations must know the suffering of their ancestors, but Roll didn't understand why the rite was held here. The first count did not come to this cave alone. He was followed by a girl, a slave knight, who was ordered to flee. Thanks to the count, she went from being a slave to a knight, and now considered it a duty to protect him. The fact that the ancestor of the Kraut family gave her a name, he himself considered only the salary he should receive. The count, in his only incarnation, was a home for the girl, and she could not abandon that home. And that slave knight was, in reality, the first countess. According to Ramiel, drinking underground water here means sharing all misfortunes together. And it was in this place that the count decided to get married. Roll agreed to do it only upon learning that the rite would make them husband and wife. Seeing his flushed face, the girl also drank the water hoping it was alcohol. Everything seemed normal, only Roll thought people would consider that an indirect kiss. The next step in the marriage ritual is sharing a meal together. Upon seeing the bottle of wine, the Viscount was pleased, as he often drank. And the reason was that alcohol is something that is always present on the battlefield. Although there were moments of drinking in the original novel, Ramilla didn't know he liked it. During the meal, the gentleman wanted to know if there would be another ceremony for the wedding. And it turned out it would be in a year. After living happily as a married couple for hundreds of days, they could celebrate the party, fulfilling family traditions. Since the first countess had the status of a slave, there was much criticism. That is why this tradition arose. Today the heroes registered their marriage, something much more important than the ceremony. First, the heroine decided to raise their glasses. She knew the last ritual still remained, holding hands and sleeping together all night. That was the final marriage ritual. Shortly after, when Roll called Ramilla, she was already sleeping soundly. In reality, she was only pretending to snore so as not to feel so awkward about the situation. Determined not to lose the opportunity, Roll thanked her. He said that before her, he was on the verge of the abyss. The Viscount had become someone incapable of holding a sword. He thought his miserable life was coming to an end. Obsessed with recovering, he forgot his loved ones, and he would have lost them if it weren't for Ramilla. Thus, with her arrival in his insignificant life, the heroine saved Lord Roll from the swamp of misfortune. The gentleman didn't know what else to say to thank her, but his gratitude was immeasurable. Barely restraining the lump in his throat, Ramilla let a silent tear fall. Of course she would do that for her beloved. Undoubtedly, Lord Roll looked like an angel when he slept, and only by his side did the heroine feel a true relief. And she could sleep soundly. The next morning, Carol went to see the lady, while her fiancé was urgently called by his father. Glancing at the bed, the maid wanted to know if anything had happened the previous night. After all, Lady Ramilla read many love stories the day before the ceremony. As if studying it in books, Carol decided that, since the lady had no experience, although they read those stories together. However, now she realized they just held hands all night and slept. After the conversation, the heroine went to meet her mother, who suddenly called her urgently. Meanwhile, the lady was sending letters to the vassals, containing news about the marriage promises. In reality, no one knew how the vassals would react if Ramilla, who was not interested in suitors, suddenly got married. First of all, everyone will be interested to know what kind of person she chose as her fiancé. Lord Roll, just like Riera, is from the capital, and this might not sit well with the vassals. 25 years ago, when Mrs. Crowd first joined the family, she didn't have it easy either. One day, ladies from the vassal families burst into the estate, and first suggested to Riera that they organize a tea time. At that time, the lady was young and thought it was a kind of welcome ceremony. But they did it on purpose, to mock and ignore the lady from the capital during the tea. After all this, Riera threw the cup, drew her sword, and even overturned the table. Only after brandishing her sword, defending herself, did the ladies from the vassal families fall silent. Ramilla must have seen her father's face when he ran towards them, thinking something serious was happening. There was a lot of noise outside, so he went to see, but what he saw confirmed to him that his wife was crazy. But after that day, the vassals who were there disappeared, and Riera asked Roll to warn her about the tea. Just in case, after telling the master everything in great detail, the heroine begged him to prepare himself mentally. Seeing that the count didn't look well, Rami guessed that something in the novel involved his social circle. Before, she didn't care about these things, but now she does. Everything changed since she met him. All because they are a couple. Although it was more Roll's fear than a real burden. Due to the circumstances that arose, he confessed that he had dealt with nobles before. A long time ago, the Viscount went to the noble residence. It was spacious, and he heard that many nobles had arrived. Since it was the first time he was invited, he had to attend. Besides, Viscount Orm insisted on it. At the entrance, Derek greeted him cheerfully, confirming that Lord Roll was a true heartthrob. Finally inside, surrounded by high society, a crowd stretched out before his eyes. Luckily, the Viscount drank. Among the knights, some abstained from alcohol. After the war, everyone wanted to drink, but the abstainers were a minority. People kept arriving, but Roll did his best to stay on the sidelines. Suddenly, Viscount Roll Arnon was presented as the hero of the war. The nobles were kinder than expected. Everyone greeted him like a hero. But then, Derek received a report and had to step away for an instant. Roll went out onto the balcony to cool off, wondering why everyone else drank so much. He heard voices coming from above, and with curiosity at its peak, he listened. The gentleman was stunned to hear that the centurion's invitation was a sham for Derek. The nobles, with a certain fear in their eyes, shook the hand of a commoner. They assigned him the role of a slave, a bastard, a being devoid of the essentials. Just a moment ago, they were laughing and chatting. What masks these people wear? Absolutely shocked by everything, the gentleman decided to flee home urgently. He felt terrible and hoped that Count Derek would understand his sudden departure. Involuntarily, Roll heard Derek flatly refusing to pay for the cure. He was indignant that the knight dared to ask him for medical expenses for a broken arm. At that instant, Roll couldn't believe it was the same, the kind Derek. It was a cruel treatment towards someone injured while protecting the Count himself, seeing that all nobles were the same. Ruel knew this was not his place. After everything he heard, Ramilla felt that he saw her the same way he saw them. However, the master trusted her, who appeared in his difficult moments, and helped him. Generally, instead of helping people in trouble, people step aside. In that case, Ramilla suggested, he trust the people she also trusted. Of course, there are people who really get on her nerves, but most were good people. The girl had a good eye, so she didn't let unpleasant people approach her. Despite everything, she was willing to give up the idea if Ruel suddenly became concerned. But as Sir Viscount pointed out, it wasn't necessary. And judging by his face, he was clearly excited. He promised to do everything possible not to ruin Kraut's reputation. In that case, Ramilla urgently decided to meet Carol, leaving the master alone. Realizing it was his fault, Roll knew that anyone would be angry if they were grabbed by the hand. He understood that the girl was bothered by his brusque manner, but taking her hand, he felt an inexplicable relief. After all, if it was about tea, conversation would be the central point of the meeting. With no conversational skills, Sir Viscount feared making mistakes in front of his guests. Instead of worrying, he decided to give it his all and gather information about his adversary. To win the battle, he needed to find someone who knew about the young nobles. Upon learning that someone was trying to harm Lord Royal, Sibiri thought it was madness. His sister only supposed, but she was clear that the objective of those people was to attack the master. Of course, there would be no threat to Kraut, but he came to report that they must prepare in advance. Who would want the downfall of the Viscount of Arnon? The question is, who would dare to confront the hero of the Empire? No matter who it is, Sibri didn't think it would matter with his sister near Roll, a man with excessive talent that provokes feelings of inferiority in others, a monster that mocks its opponents with the sword on its shoulder and achieves victory. Soon, Sibri Crowd was informed that Sir Roll Asgard requested his permission to enter. The Viscount had a conversation and, fortunately, managed to obtain a lot of useful information. It is natural for family members to help each other. Sibri would spare no effort for his brother, and worrying about Amy is also another natural skill of the second older brother. Since Roll is her first older brother, it is natural for Amy that Sibri is her second older brother. He always dreamed of being a good brother and having a little sister. But when the conversation reached Lady Ramiel, Lord Kraut declared they were not siblings, but strangers. He wanted a little sister to finally feel like the older brother. Meanwhile, Army's mother paced around the room, torturing herself over what to do. While thinking about what to wear, Carol entered, assuming she was waiting. The maid suggested she have dinner with the Count and Countess. It had been a long time since she had dinner with them. Doubt instantly flashed in Army's eyes. She thought she would bother them. Just as she was about to dine alone, her two brothers entered to accompany her. Since Sibri dined with a lady yesterday, Carol insisted that she dine with their parents today. But the brothers didn't even care about that, determined to see their parents together, the three of them. But when they asked permission to dine, Madame Rear gave them a firm refusal. Or rather, she gave it to Sibri. She gave permission to the other two to enter. With the young master's permission, Sir Royal and his sister went to see the Countess to speak privately. Meanwhile, another member of the Crowd clan met with Carol to chat for a while. Suddenly, Ramilla mentioned Viscount Orm. Remembering that he was still around, knowing how things were, the maiden revealed that he came yesterday, but the lady didn't deign to show herself. While the heroine was delayed a bit, Orm took advantage of his time in such a beautiful place. He was buying necessary supplies for his research in the Kraut markets, bigger than those in the capital. Furthermore, goods from the Beastmen arrive here faster than in other regions. Now, after defeating monsters, the gentleman planned to obtain magic stones easily. His only hope was that, with them, the research would advance by leaps and bounds. Although it is only a hypothesis, Orm believed that the magic stone was crucial for Roll's recovery. Then, Ramilla promised to give as much as necessary, but the master didn't remember that the stones needed to be collected to throw them onto the market. It turned out that the Crowd family had been releasing them for a long time. Most likely, there is still some left in the warehouse. This news cheered up Orm, because in the capital getting such a stone is like pulling a star from the sky. If it weren't for Ramilla, the master would have spent all his money buying magic stones. Instead of money, the girl suggested he use the ring, as a lot of money would be needed to buy equipment for the laboratory. The ring he gave her now is a ring with the seal of the Crowd family. This ring allowed him to buy anything in the territory of the Crowd family. Orm's gratitude knew no bounds. In that case, he had something to show Lady Ramilla. Looking at the medical research, the girl only feared she wouldn't understand anything anyway. On the first day, Roll's legs were paralyzed due to Laura's disappearance. On the third day, the patient complained of pain, but fortunately it subsided quickly. On the seventh day, although he had strength, the patient refused food due to a feeling of loss, which was worrying. Seeing this in the original, Ramilla suddenly understood that something strange was going on here. In the conclusion, it was said that the patient could not remember anything about what happened on the day of the incident. It was so similar to part of the aura being lost due to an aura storm. According to Orm, apart from the memories of the day related to the aura, the gentleman retained memories of his acquaintances, the assassination attempt on Baron Dallas and Viscount Orm, and the unidentified individuals in black hoods. And this time, Rolls lost memories. The heroine understood that none of this was in the original story. She thought it would be easy knowing the original plot, but now it turns out she doesn't know everything about it. The Crowd Mansion was also a place not mentioned in the original novel. Ramilla decided that she must strive to ensure Roll would not suffer and would eventually be happy. She needs to try her best to achieve a happy ending for him. Furthermore, the girl thought it was no coincidence that she remembered her past life. In the morning, while Roll was busy, Miss Ramilla went to have breakfast with him. Since morning, she had been reading books on medicine, history, and others. She also read books in ancient language. She did everything for the guests who would soon visit Crowd, studying stories that everyone would like. Knowing this, the girl was terrified to think that he had been sitting there all night. Roll knew he was overdoing it, but the tea felt like a mission. The first one in a long time. He really wanted to succeed, but often Ramilla didn't even take his opinion into account. In that case, she couldn't do anything other than suggest they read books together. Because the Kraut family protects its own, preventing anyone from suffering alone. And since Roll is part of their family, his wife, Mrs. Ramilla, believed she had to help him with everything. The time spent reading books flew by, and when night fell, Roll noticed that the girl had fallen asleep. She must have been very tired, so the gentleman decided to finish before she woke up. Suddenly, the heroine opened her eyes and stretched sweetly, wondering since when she had been sleeping. At that instant, Roll did the same, and apologized for accidentally falling asleep during the reading. The girl was happy not to be the only one who fell asleep. Besides, the gentleman hadn't slept all night. Meanwhile, on the way to Kraut, a lord from a noble family thought it had been a long time since he visited. The next day, after calming down, Viscount Arnon presented himself to the noble family's guests. It was believed that he, being a battlefield hero, would make a great impression on people. Among the guests at the Kraut mansion were Mr. Bammon and Sir Tian, introducing himself as Lady Ramilli's husband. Sir Roll hoped for their support in the future. Furthermore, he prepared small gifts for the guests. Perhaps they are not enough, but he wanted to give them. They are all of different sizes, and their contents vary among themselves. Upon opening his gift, Bammon received a book on medicine that he had been waiting for more than 3 years. Roll heard that the gentleman was interested in medicine and prepared a book from the Eastern Kingdom. It is impossible to imagine how grateful Bammon was to have been given something so valuable. It seems the Viscount isn't bad at it, but not everyone at the table spoke. A noble's face changed from the moment Sir Royal arrived for tea. Carlos from the Muram family was a man with a fervent passion for fencing. Carlos, claiming to feel unwell, asked for permission to go out for a walk. Bammon begged the master not to get upset, thinking his friend was just carsick from the trip. As Tian pointed out, it's probably not carsickness. It must be related to Lady Ramel. Roll must have known that. In fact, this guy often visited Lady Ramel during meetings. And for years now, he had only visited the county, bringing lots of gifts with him. The kind Carlos not only gave gifts to Ramel, but also to everyone around her. It seemed everyone else was ready to condemn Tian for his opinion. Upon learning everything as it was, Roll felt very grateful that they told him the whole truth. Soon the tea ended. The guests dispersed until dinner, but the hero couldn't recover. He was fighting a strange feeling about the fact that Ramel hadn't told him about Sir Carlos's courtship. This guy has good looks, masters fencing, and is also the heir to a county. But Roll couldn't offer him anything, lacking all of that. Absolutely nothing. Now, the only question tormenting him was what kind of relationship Ramilla had. And Carlos, undoubtedly, if they had a special relationship, he would have proposed marriage to her already. Looking out the window, Roll suddenly saw Carlos, and upon closer inspection, noticed he was holding a ring. Considering their master magnificent, Baman and Tian felt flattered that he even cared about their tastes. Thinking about it, Carlos didn't even come for lunchtime, and because of him, Tian almost ruined the atmosphere. Both thought their master Roll was gloomy, but they were lucky he wasn't offended. Upon hearing the murmurs, Lady Ramilla approached so suddenly that the gentleman fell to the floor in fright. She really wanted to know what Tian had said to make the Viscount suddenly so gloomy. According to the young man, they told her about Carlos, for example, that he visited Lady Ramilla often. Carlos likes that girl, and Lord Roll must have noticed. Tian tried with all his might to prove that, when they met, that guy only sought Miss Kraut. Furthermore, he constantly went to see her with gifts and sent her many more. But if Ramilla considered it impossible, the young man decided to tell what happened today. Despite the tea Lord Roll offered being splendid, attending to everyone, Carlos was stunned all day. Probably, it is all because Ramilla is getting married. In that case, the heroine decided to ask him directly first, without saying a word. Sighing, the boys thought they would receive a couple of blows. Lady Ramilla became softer after getting married. After the talk, the girl went straight to see Carlos, and the gentleman opened the door with tears in his eyes. But seeing my lady at the door of his room, he smiled and wanted to know why she was there. Determined to get straight to the point, Lady Crowd asked him if he liked her. Since she liked another guy and was already married to Roll, she wanted Carlos to give up. Bursting into laughter, the gentleman asked her permission to ask why she was saying such nonsense. Once it was known that everything was Tian's fault, Carlos wanted to settle accounts. But Ramilla wanted to finish him off herself. Remembering her tears, the girl thought she had misunderstood Roll because of Tian. Their conversation was interrupted by the Viscount, who arrived at the same time as Lady Ramilla. And from what he had heard, he wanted to know what kind of ring Sir Carlos was holding at that moment. Carlos was caught between a rock and a hard place, and both insisted on the same thing, that he tell the truth. He didn't really want to say it, but that ring has another owner. Shortly before, when Carlos left the tea to get some air, he hesitated about where to go. Suddenly, he noticed the presence of a young woman who approached worriedly to ask what was happening. Then, the gentleman confessed that he needed to tell someone something, but he couldn't find him. Encouraged to help, Army was willing to find that person to know the name. In that case, Carlos entrusted her with a message and asked her to deliver it to a very important person. It turned out that the girl knew that person and left immediately, promising to deliver everything instantly. Now, sure that girl would come, the gentleman no longer wanted to hide. Insulting himself, as night fell, upon seeing Carol with his own eyes, Carlos felt an irresistible attraction, and he hugged her tightly. They were supposed to meet on the weekend, but he got the chance to see her today. Despite this, Carol was worried that they would be caught if she continued acting that way. She couldn't tell the lady anything, and came to finally try on the ring. Carlos didn't demand immediate marriage or commitment. He just wanted to give a gift, although he should have known that if he later asked her to take it off, Carol never would. Therefore, the reason he visited the mansion so often was to see Carol. And regarding gifts, if there were many, he thought some would be for the maid. It is obvious that Carlos kept the relationship secret because he didn't think he would get permission to marry. But even if he didn't get permission and had to leave home, he planned to stay with Carol. Acting irresponsibly, he didn't even think that in the end they wouldn't be happy. The problem is that Carlos is the only son of the Count, and Carol, a fallen noble who sold her title. A relationship between them would undoubtedly be a big problem in aristocratic society. Hoping he would understand, Ramilla explained that the best thing was to separate. If this situation complicated Carol's life, it was something to consider. If nothing went well, if Carlos would leave everything and return home. At that instant, It seemed the most sensible option was to separate, while their good relationship remained intact. The protagonist was sure that, first, she had to plan how to tell her parents everything. The only comfort for Carlos was the possibility of getting permission. That calmed him down a bit. After the talk, the girl decided to speak with Lord Roll and make sure he was okay. She simply remembered that serious expression he had put on his face a little while ago. As soon as the young woman said she was afraid of ruining his mood, the gentleman flatly contradicted her. Actually, he misunderstood everything, thinking Ramilla liked Carlos. But for some reason, he didn't ask before. Determined to tell the truth, without boasting, the protagonist confessed that she had never dated anyone. Surely, not even in the future, will someone appear who can love her. Hearing that, Roll instantly corrected her, stating that there would indeed be someone who would love her. Lady Ramilla is strong, as well as incredibly kind and beautiful, and deserves to be admired. Knowing that the master considered her a good person, the young woman thought it was a confession, and thanked him. Before leaving, Roll wanted to invite her to the bedroom, but feared she might misunderstand him. However, he thought Ramilla had also suffered today because of him. Just like the heroine, wanting to keep talking, the master decided to stop for today. The next day, the first thing Ramilla did was visit her husband, just as Viscount Orm arrived. The doctor arrived, as today was the day for the medical checkup. Looking at Roll, the heroine saw in his hands a strange sphere, an artifact that checked the condition of gold. When everything was finished, Gold did not react. Roll's expression was one of total dejection. Orm asked about sleep, and the gentleman confidently stated that he had no problems. According to the results, his health is improving, and he looks better than when he lived in the capital. Not long ago, Carlos solved everything. Finally, Ruel could sleep peacefully. Suddenly, he felt something crawling on his legs, and he threw off the blanket to see if it was a bug. At that instant, enlightenment came to the Lord. He realized his leg was itching, clutching his chest in pain. A sharp pain. Ruel got scared and lost control. Orm had already warned that it was a common syndrome in people with paralyzed nerves. He tried to hold on a little longer, gritting his teeth, convincing himself it would pass soon. Thinking about Orm's question, Roll decided it was better not to talk about it now. He attributed it all to a reaction from the accumulated fatigue during the preparation for the tea ceremony. The most important thing was that everyone around him was happy, and he thought it was better not to tell them anything. Now, Army looked much more radiant than the day Cybri Crowd first met her. Of course, she was already radiant on the first day, but she didn't receive the attention others were giving her now. While they were discussing where to go next, Cybri could barely react upon seeing an approaching cart. Fortunately, the girl wasn't hurt and remained unharmed. However, she clearly heard pleas for help. When asking her brother for help, Army was sure she had heard the voice of a child from that cart asking for help. As soon as he heard them call him older brother for the first time, the brave Cybri ran out without hesitation. The cart hadn't managed to get far, and the gentleman quickly caught up with the coachman, ordering him to stop immediately. As soon as the horses stopped, Lord Kraut resolutely decided to conduct a search. Seeing an innocent puppy in the cage, he demanded an animal sales license from the coachman. In his lands, only those licensed could legally trade animals. Cybertai Crowd assumed that the gentleman was unaware of the laws created to protect wildlife. Determined to know more at the castle, he ordered his men to arrest the criminal and take him there. Surprisingly, Army was convinced that the puppy had asked her for help. It was hard to believe that this little wolf cub was truly a prisoner. After the wolf's appearance, Rira and Shale thought their son had gone crazy bringing it. Taking the blame, Army thought she had been too stubborn with her brother for worrying. Kraut's parents instantly changed their minds. One more wolf wouldn't bother them. The strange thing was that Army heard its voice. No animal talks. It's probably a prisoner. Ramilla also decided to talk to him and asked him to transform into a human. But Army first asked for clothes for him. It turned out this little one was the same age as Army and was a very shy boy. All people here are kind, so Ramilla allowed the boy to behave as he felt comfortable. With Army's silent consent, the little one calmed down and finally showed his true form with ears and tail. Through his savior, he told them his name was Lewin and shared information that froze the blood. He and his family were heading to the Cloudy Territory, but after a monster attack, they got separated. When Lewin was alone, he was kidnapped, and now he didn't know what to do if he couldn't find his family. With tears in her eyes, Army tried to calm the boy down by telling him he was safe now. To start, Ramilla proposed finding the beastmen and handing the little one over to his parents, whom they also had to find. Lady Rita entrusted the care of the little one to Army, as he only trusted her. She could only do this with her brother's permission, so she didn't waste time convincing him. She wanted to help Lewin find his family, just as her brother saved her life. Without thinking much, Lord Roll supported his sister and decided to do it, as Army saved that little one. At night, Ramilla bothered the gentleman to talk, interrupting him in his reading. This time, Roll was wearing glasses and looked even more incredible than he already was. He wanted to study the beastmen, but reading small print was difficult for him. That's why he put on the glasses. Actually, Roll likes his new family. Everyone is kind to him. That's why the protagonist didn't know what to do. Being good at advancing relationships, Carol decided to advise him not to delay the first kiss, and to start with a massage. Thinking the gentleman was very tired, the girl said she was ready to help him relax. Following the maid's advice, he decided to give her a little massage so he could enjoy her touch. Even if it wasn't so, Roll found it hard to resist the best masseuse, approved by Lady Riera. It turned out her massage was incredible, but the young master felt really awkward. What situation? Suddenly remembering he had to visit Army, the young Viscount asked the girl to stop. Thinking she couldn't stop there, Ramilla tried to hold him back in a panic attack. But it was too late. The heroine was mercilessly rejected, as if she were going to kiss her husband when he was old. Only upon reaching his room did Roll feel safe and let out a sigh of relief. Suddenly, he felt the same pain as before, although today he hadn't exerted himself so much. Rather, the master had lived carefree these days, and now he felt like he was going to collapse. Surprisingly, just the thought of Ramilla being able to enter worked the miracle. He moved his legs. The next morning, Lady Ramilla was determined to have breakfast with her husband. Her morning delirium about her first kiss was becoming uncontrollable. She was going to demonstrate how today's Ramilla differed from yesterday's. Before entering her husband's room, the girl ran into Orm leaving. He told her he had business with the gentleman, and also, Roll called him for a moment. Although the gentleman tried to appear completely transparent, she caught his falsehoods. Under pressure, Orm had to give in and take the lady to the laboratory, where he told her about Roll's illness. He hid it because the Lord couldn't stand being a burden and asked them not to tell her. Before telling her, Orm planned to first finish preparing the medicine. As soon as she learned about Roll's condition, she resolved to finish it as soon as possible and tell Ramilla everything. Although a horrible stench came from the cauldron, the medicine's effect could restore lost aura. This medicine was used on the battlefields, thanks to its unique effect on the aura of the Northern Knights. But Orm managed to detect a side effect in the potion used by the Northerners. Of course, the medicine created by his hands has no side effects. He removed the herbs used by the Northerners from the medicine and replaced them with local herbs. It's good enough that Roll's treatment improves after this. Even if it doesn't improve immediately, Orm planned to start manufacturing the medicine in the capital. But the limited budget prevented it. Although he concluded that there should be no side effects, it would be good to check. The Viscount had already tested it several times, and there were no side effects, but the fatigue disappeared. Ramilla was not wrong in understanding that an aura user was needed. This way, they will know the results in a month. Since Orm had already drunk the medicine, the heroine did not hesitate to agree and demanded the potion. The time finally came to test the miraculous cure, but the girl hesitated just before drinking it. Although its appearance was repulsive, the kind that chills the soul, Ramilla drank the potion in one gulp. The first effect of the medicine was vomiting, which indicated it was of the best quality. Seized by wild panic, Ramilla suggested they look for someone else for this experiment. Looking at the sky, Lady Riera noticed a sudden flash of lightning, as if something important had happened. A week later, the heroine presented Roll with a new medicine, bringing a pile of sweets with her. And cakes. The new medicine, prepared by Viscount Orm, she had discovered thanks to the Northerners. The medicine was not so urgent as to postpone it. However, it had to be taken as soon as possible. Wanting to personally ensure Roll drank it, Ramilla asked him to do it while she was there. Knowing that 1 cup of medicine cost as much as the villagers' expenses in a year, the gentleman drank it all to the last drop. The bitter taste tensed every muscle, but fortunately, Ramilla gave him a candy instantly. The protagonist sighed with relief, as Roll noticed nothing out of the ordinary. She was also taking the medicine. The trial ended a week ago, but the experiment required more people. It turned out the whole family had been involved in the medicine experiment. Ramilla hid it only because she thought her husband would object if he knew. In reality, the Viscount was saddened that the girl wasn't taking care of herself, but he perfectly understood her feelings. Therefore, he was sincerely grateful to her and her whole family, promising to try his best to recover. Although Lewin promised to go to bed early, today he was looking out the window again, fearing his family had forgotten him. In an attempt to convince him that his relatives might come even at dawn, Army was trying to get the boy to sleep. Before sleeping, the girl decided to pray for Lewin so that his parents would appear, asking God not to take them away, as happened with his own. Seeing this, although late, Cybri decided to search for his parents on his own. After taking the medicine, a few days ago Roll felt a pain that appeared more often. The pain is mild but frequent. That's why he asked them not to pay attention to him. They had two options. First, Orm proposed reducing the amount of pain by lowering the medicine dosage. Against all odds, Roll was not ready to give up now. He decided to keep taking the medicine. Maybe it sounds silly, but he thought the frequent pains would have their effect. Once he almost lost, following the plan but following his intuition, he won the battle. This being the intuition of a war hero, Orm agreed to do what Lord Roll wished. He suddenly asked what his relationship with Lady Ramel was like. He didn't know details, it was just his interest. Just in case, Orm said there were no guarantees that the favor of others would last forever. His interest lay in discovering what favor, gift, meant to Roll, or eternal possession. That night, Carol noticed the Viscount's arrival and wanted to notify the lady, but he headed towards her. Mainly, he came to find out what Ramil liked, wishing to give her a gift. If the maid reveals her twisted nature, as soon as it is known, she will be buried behind the mansion. What Ramil likes is the sword and its handling, in which she is good, but she doesn't appreciate jewelry. However, the important thing is not the content of the gift, but that it is offered wholeheartedly. Carol's main advice to Roll was that a gift made with his own hands would have great value. Although the gentleman wasn't skilled at it, he would be pleased to receive a handmade gift. So he decided. He dedicated the night to his business, as Roll thought. One works much better in silence. Thanks to Ramil, he now had personal space, as she allowed him to use her office. Remembering Carol's advice, the master calmly embroidered the inscription on the handkerchiefs, believing it was the best gift. It had been 3 days of searching, but even the next day all attempts yielded no result. Be that as it may, in the Beastmen village they will surely find out something. Soon they finally arrived at the Swin Beastmen village. Many knights had run into them, but few had seen their settlement. Leaving his cowardly room, Master Cybri jumped off the cliff and ordered them to fend for themselves. The first thing he did was take a look into a house, where a girl opened up, surprised by the appearance of a human. Asking for help, the master recounted that he was looking for a gray werewolf who had appeared recently. If it's a gray werewolf, then 2 of them were here 2 days ago. 2 horrible gray werewolves definitely entered the Beastmen village. According to the girl, it seems they said they were looking for their son. The werewolves said they fought monsters, but their son disappeared. Lewin told the same story. They headed northwest, a place infested with monsters, sure that their son had fallen into their clutches. When all the information came to light, the knights finally reached the village exhausted. Since the investigation here is over, Cybri proposed 2 options to choose from. Either one runs to get reinforcements, while the others wait in the village, or they all go to the northwest on their own, to that monster-infested place. The reason for such haste was the pity Cybri felt for the little one who had lost his parents. According to Lewin, his family wanted to move and settle in the Kraut lands. Otherwise, there would be no reason to take such risks, crossing the border. Only the Kraut County is benevolent towards beastmen. The Count's duty is to protect his territories and residents. That's why Cybri was in such a hurry. Meanwhile, high up in the northwestern mountains, Leubel, fleeing from bloodthirsty monsters, was wounded. Knowing that Lewin was still alive, he felt no pity. He only feared for him. Terrified that something would happen to his son, he was willing to give his life for his salvation. Suddenly, the beastmen sensed a strong smell and human footsteps. Someone was there. A gentleman emerged from the slums. His boots echoed. A knight's sword gleamed in its sheath. Leubel, realizing it was a knight, was about to attack. But the gentleman asked if they were Lewin's parents. After finding the little one's parents, Sir Cybri introduced himself and said their son was under the protection of the Kraut County. Worried about his son, Leubel couldn't hold back tears of relief, thanking the gods that his son was alive. Suddenly, he decided to call his kin, although it seemed they were the only werewolves there. It turned out they had scattered throughout the area, but now their search time had significantly decreased. The reunion of the Wolfman family is a bright and happy moment, filling their hearts with joy and warmth. To celebrate, Count Shale Crowd proposed a grand banquet and moving to the dining room. How exciting! At the table, the gentleman brought up the topic of why the Beastmen decided to go to Crowd. The mystery is revealed. The truth is that the situation in the kingdom of Morno worsened with the arrival of the new queen. Everything gets complicated. She was trying to expel Princess Pyre and name her son Crown Prince. A power struggle. Therefore, the nobles of the factions of the deceased queen and the current one are at odds. War between factions. At that time, she showered the Beastmen with money and food in exchange for their legitimacy. Hidden interests. But when economic problems arose, they stopped sponsoring the Beastmen. Misery looms. According to Luan's mother, living in Mormo is unbearable now. It will soon meet its end. The kingdom is on the verge. Shale had heard about the disputes in the kingdom with the arrival of the new Queen Sheen, but he didn't think it was that serious. And now, the Beastman pack wanted to become soldiers of the Crowd County, as it is known that werewolves are excellent defenders. The proposal didn't seem so bad, so Riera promised to find them a place on the border after the meal. A second ago, Luan was happy, but he held his breath upon learning that they would soon have to leave the castle. The little one finally found his parents, but now he only wished that Army would go with them too. Without the girl, he flatly refused to leave the castle, behaving like a small child. At that moment, Roll held his wife's hand for the first time, wishing to know if there was any way to stop them. He didn't think separating the children would be beneficial. As for the fears of surviving with humans, the inhabitants of Crowd live in harmony with Beastmen. Since they wanted to be soldiers of the Crowd County, Ramilla proposed they become the castle defenders. To start, she gave them the opportunity to live here for a month. There is no better solution to not disappoint the children. The problem was solved. Army liked it in the end too. After all, she is still a child. That night, Riera decided to find out why her husband was staring so much at the map, thinking he wanted to expand territories. On the map, there was a small portion of land between the Kingdom of Mornon and the Kraut County. Suddenly, Lord Shale felt an irrepressible desire to seize that territory. As stated before, the soldiers on the border had stopped receiving their salary. It is not surprising that if there is chaos inside the country because of the Queen, there is also chaos outside. The couple decided to start conquering territories after their son-in-law recovered his health. At that moment, Lady Piri was urgently called by Her Majesty the Queen, who was waiting for the princess in the garden. On the way to the garden, Milady tried to talk to the maid, but she simply hurried her along. No one here listens to Princess Pyre or obeys her whims. As soon as she arrived for tea, the lady ordered her to greet Princess Antonia of the Empire. The queen seated Pyre at the table, finding her pathetic for not knowing why she had been called. Actually, everyone wanted the girl to go somewhere, and Antonia knew she knew Count Kraut. It wasn't long before Orm finally got it, the new aura meter. It looked like the old one, but this little device measures aura values below 100%. The principle is the same, so Roll was also anxiously awaiting the results. Almost instantly, everything was over. Orm could not give happy news. What a disappointment. At that moment, the aura meter in Roll's hands lit up, flooding the room with light. Seeing that miracle, the heroes only thought one thing. Did it finally work? In summary, Mr. Roll does have aura, which means rehabilitation is possible. But that doesn't mean the Count can get up and leave right now. First, he must go through the stages of treatment. So, the hero understood that that pain meant his body was improving. Now, when the only opportunity appeared, he had 3 future options. The first is the total recovery of the aura and the ability to walk, the ideal option for him. The second is the recovery of the aura only, at 50%. In this case, Roll will also be able to walk, but he will need something similar to a cane. And the third option is the minimum level of recovery, where he will only be able to move his legs. In any case, whatever the result, Ramilla was willing to stay by his side. Even a few words of support from her gave the Lord self-confidence. If only the Count's legs recovered as soon as possible, with Ramilla, he could receive the warm spring. Roll thanked her. He felt much better, and all thanks to her words. As night fell, his legs started hurting again. But remembering his wife's words, he would endure a little for her sake. At the same time, Ramilla felt a sinister sensation inside her and thought something had happened to her bun. Without hesitation, she ran to her husband's bedroom, but no one opened the door to her calls. Hearing a heavy sigh, the girl burst into the room and saw Roll, whose legs were hurting again. In a panic, the gentleman reassured her, telling her he just needed painkillers, and sent her back to sleep. However, his wife knew that he had been suffering from pain since the day of the tea. The heroine guessed that he had hidden it from her and Viscount Orm, not wanting them to worry. But as she said before, they are a couple, and they shouldn't have secrets from each other. Promising not to do it again, Reuel asked if my lady would accept something he wanted to give her as a gift. It was the first time he had done anything like this, and he thought it wasn't much, but he handed his gift to the girl. The gentleman only received. He never gave anything in return. Since he couldn't move freely, it was the only thing he could give his wife. A scarf so soft, of a beautiful color, with the name Ramilla Crowd embroidered. It couldn't be bad. The next day, upon waking, the protagonist decided to start building a display case for Roll's gift. But it was only a dream. Time flew. Fortunately, Roll's rehabilitation was paying off. He managed to stand up, and this time crossed the bridge in just 32 seconds. It was much faster than the last time, when he had reached a record of 38 seconds. Noticing his great fatigue, Ramilla wanted to wipe the sweat from his face, but Roll was going to do it himself. Unable to resist the drops of sweat sliding down his pale neck, the protagonist insisted on doing it herself. In this strange and seductive atmosphere, it seemed like the perfect moment for a kiss. Sent by the gods, Roll seemed to feel the same as he took her hand. Through clenched teeth, they moved closer to each other. But just at that moment, loud voices echoed. The Count's knights appeared out of nowhere, interrupting the most inopportune moment. Fidel, Kai, and Baron Dallas decided they should have waited. In the conversation, Ramilla suddenly remembered that she hadn't seen Garen and Garen in a long time. According to Fidel, those two went north, where a war will soon break out and there is an opportunity to earn money. The heroes spent the rest of the time talking. Roll's recovery was bringing them all together. Honestly, Baron Dallas did not think his lord would recover so quickly. It was amazing. While not a medicine expert, he knew that damaged nerves are very difficult to restore. After all, Orm himself said, when he returned to the capital, that the treatment would be complicated. He was convinced that the patient's will was vital for his recovery. But Sir Roll's will was weakening day by day. He felt useless. At first he did want to wield the sword, but soon stopped wishing for anything. When it was time for the checkup, Orm found his master a mere shell, without mentioning the future. Roll looked like a burden, full of debts, dreaming of getting married, although he believed none would be happy with him. One could say it was a lack of desire, but Orm knew that wishing alone was not enough. He has a theory running through his head. Undoubtedly, Roll needs to laugh more, because a person's aura is nourished by their positive emotions. That is Viscount Orm's theory. This week, Army studied the dynamics of imperial politics with the Count, and today they congratulated her and gave her candies with the chef's recipe. The classes were a piece of cake, and the girl wanted to learn everything quickly. Besides, they take great care of her. Seeing how well she is doing, Roll is happy, but he realizes how scatterbrained he was in the capital. If he had realized sooner, Army would already know everything, deciding that adults have a lot to talk about. The girl leaves them alone and takes Lewin away. So, as his sister told him, Roll suggests to his wife that they go eat alone. On the way to the dining room, the protagonist suddenly blurts out that everything seems very strange to her. When they met, Roll rejected her. No one imagined things would change like this. The gentleman felt terrible hearing that, and had no choice but to apologize from the heart. But if she had accepted at first, she would have felt uncomfortable. So everything is fine in the end. Sometimes, the hero thinks about what would have happened if he hadn't accepted her marriage proposal. If he hadn't accepted the offer, the family Roll protected, like himself, would have vanished from this world. Just like in the original story, the master would lose his mansion and end up on the street. He would wander the streets looking for Orm, who would suddenly disappear. Roll would never find him, because by then the Viscount would already be dead. And in the end, the novel's protagonist would inevitably hit rock bottom. Then, after half a year, winter would arrive in which Hermie would fade away forever. Nevertheless, Ramilla said that even if they hadn't met, everything would be fine. This brought a smile to Roll's face, although he was sure he wouldn't be as happy as he is now. Meanwhile, the children went to Orm's laboratory, where Lewin watched the man work. Suddenly, Orm seemed to feel unwell. The investigation had reached a dead end. As he said, to be completely cured, one must use the magic stone correctly. He seriously believed that these stones were useful in medicine when they are dangerous. As is known, these stones are only used to create artifacts. But Orm found a record on the purification of magic stones. Logically, according to the material, purified magic stones are safe for people. However, apparently, only a first-class mage can purify a stone. The Viscount met with some, but they all insisted they couldn't do it. The information was reliable, as it was left by the famous doctor from the kingdom of Mornon. He purified the stone with an unknown force, but the problem is that he didn't say which one. The Baron had no idea how to purify a stone that even mages couldn't. But he knew the stone would glow when a talented person took it in their hand. The purified magic stone will turn white, and only in special cases will it be transparent. While studying the material, Lewin suddenly decided to retrieve the stone that fell near him. Orm couldn't believe that in the boy's hands, there was a perfectly purified white magic stone. It was simply incredible. So Orm asked the boy to purify another small stone. In return, he promised to give Lewin as many magic stones as he wanted, just to see him in action. Now the boy just needed to relax and do exactly the same as the last time. Taking the stone in his hands, Lewin calmed down and with an unknown force purified the magic stone. Seeing this miracle, the researcher didn't even imagine that a magic stone could really be like this. It was time for dinner, but everyone was still busy with something. So Roll came to take a look. It turns out that, after what happened, Orm is unable to compose himself and focus. He even seemed obsessed with the idea of continuing his research to obtain the most valuable thing. As soon as Roll entered, the children ran in fright to hug him. Orm was looking for him just to tell him that, thanks to Lewin, they had a chance for healing. All thanks to the magic stone, purified by Lewin's powers, to be precise. That boy, a natural mage, was their hope. Days later, the heroes gathered again, Riera included, although it was strange for her to appear after the last experiment. First, Orm met with Lewin's parents and understood that purification was an ability of the beastmen, or it had nothing to do with it. The ability was unique, as no beastman had ever purified stones. Purification was not mentioned anywhere, not even a line in the original story. Orm summoned everyone to tell them about the medicine made with the ancient potion and the magic stone. It is capable of restoring a destroyed heart core. There are no side effects as such, but problems might arise at the beginning of the treatment. The medicine made with magic stones is much more potent. Its elements will clash with the remnants of Roll's aura. There was a risk that the master would feel pain, but he radiated happiness that his aura could be restored. But there are also risks. First, some part of his body could become paralyzed. He will also want to eat and drink constantly. His legs might fail him when walking, and the risk of convulsions is heightened. In that case, Riera decided it would be better for Ramilla to take care of her husband and live with him. The long-awaited moment, when the heroine could hold his hand all night, had finally arrived. However, Roll proposed staying alone with constant visits. As Riera said, if something happened to his body, help would not arrive instantly. It's not that he didn't want to share the room with Ramil. He was just embarrassed to show his weakness. At that moment, the master remembered his wife's words. They could show each other their weaknesses. From that moment on, he asked Ramil to take care of him. A perfect decision for everyone. Since Roll was taking the medicine for the first time, half a bottle was more than enough. Ramil feared they wouldn't do a test, but Orm explained that they wouldn't get results. She was worried, although she understood that Roll was having an even worse time. Although the medicine smelled horrible, for Ramil's sake, the master agreed to drink it. It tasted like plain water, but as soon as it entered, the master writhed in unbearable pain. Although it hurt a lot now, he had to say how he felt. His legs went numb and hurt, and in his hands he experienced the same sensations. Seeing his suffering, Ramilla couldn't just stand by and watch. Thanks to her, the pain wasn't as strong, so Roll asked her not to look so sad. The instant his body completely relaxed, he closed his eyes and stopped talking. Orm completely forgot to warn that he mixed the medicine with sleeping pills, so that the Lord would bear the sharp pain unconsciously. Wiping away tears of happiness, Ramilla sent the doctor to rest, so he wouldn't overwork himself too much with the job. The girl stayed by her husband's side until night. During that time, Roll sweated a lot. In an attempt to find a handkerchief to wipe away the sweat, she stumbled upon a pile of white handkerchiefs. The heroine froze and held her breath upon seeing her name hand-embroidered on every handkerchief. In the morning, the hero woke up quite easily. Except that near dawn, his wife couldn't hold on and fell asleep sitting there. Hearing noises, the girl woke up, happy to see Roll so recovered. Surprisingly, the master felt fine, much better than yesterday. As for his core, he still couldn't be sure if anything had changed. But Ramilla knew it was impossible to recover all at once. It required constant medication. Since she had to be away for business, she promised to return around noon. Seeing her off, Roll only hoped she wouldn't overdo it. Collapsing on the bed exhausted, the girl planned to sleep until lunch, after a sleepless night. Master Roll worried upon learning she hadn't slept, but Ramilla lied and convinced him otherwise. Suddenly, the heroine remembered the play blooming in the temple, the white flower, which she saw recently. Then, she thought she could take care of a sick person, like the play's protagonist. But now, seeing how Roll endures the pain, hiding it, the girl found it quite hard. Hoping everything would end when she woke up, the protagonist finally closed her eyes. Days turned into nights. Time flew, 3 weeks had already passed, and there was no improvement in Roll. Sibiri ordered his sister not to wander around the mansion and to go to her room. It was scary to see her like that. That scoundrel had already tired her out, so much so that Ramilla suddenly stood up and threw a punch at his jaw. But her brother dodged it. Then she threw another punch and immediately regretted attacking him. She wasn't in a condition to fight now. She had no strength for anything. The first despair struck Roll in his childhood, when he managed to survive a military attack. The soldiers found a boy who had lost his parents during the evacuation. They decided to take the boy with them until his parents appeared. Food wasn't free, so in the camp, Roll learned fencing and swordsmanship. One day, his teacher proposed that he go to the capital along with everyone else. This boy turned out to be more talented than all of them combined, so the captain was not going to let him go for anything. In the end, the captain did not keep his promise, disappearing by fate's hand, leaving Roll dreaming of seeing him again. Soon rumors began that all the mercenaries who fought in the war had died. Roll, who had already experienced despair twice, sank even deeper into it. Then he made the decision to volunteer, although he was young, but he handled the sword skillfully. Starting tomorrow, training awaited him, and the soldier promised not to abandon him if anything happened. Roll could not give up everything they had taught him, deciding to take revenge on the captain at all costs. First, he would take revenge on his parents and the mercenaries who saved him. But then all reasons started to lose all meaning for him. He considered everything useless, having killed countless enemies. But starting with Army, who was in the same situation, Roll made close friends, and he thought that life was flourishing. He finally had reasons to live and fight, protecting the people he loved. But then everything collapsed when he could no longer get up. Despite all his achievements, they sent him home then, as they could not consider him a knight. Deciding that the heavens had cursed him, the hero feared his fate for the first time in his life. He, as a sinner who spilled much blood, no longer feared being unable to wield a sword. But if he could get up again, then he could protect the people he loved. So, the Lord prayed one last time that light would also come into his life. Roll woke up in the morning, seeing his wife by his side again. She had a hard time because of him. So, he decided to lay the girl in bed and wanted to sit in the wheelchair. But just at that instant, he managed to stand up. It seemed impossible. He could walk. Roll couldn't even believe it. It was incredible that his aura was returning. Seeing her husband standing, Ramilla jumped out of the chair and thought she was dreaming. Without knowing how much, Rule already felt better. The joy was so great that the heroine barely held back tears and profusely congratulated the gentleman. Sir Viscount was finally improving. She had waited for this day for a long time. To check his condition, the girl immediately brought Orm to examine him. The patient was fine, but showed some fatigue. Despite everything, Orm ordered the girl to stay by her husband's side. He couldn't leave him alone yet. While investigating an important case, Lord Crowd tried to understand what the hell was happening in the Kingdom of Mornon. He was not very convinced with the peace policy. Everything had happened very suddenly. Of course, the captain understood the Count's feelings, but he stated that the new queen desired peace. According to him, Queen Nabria overcame many obstacles to opt for a peaceful path. The ruler of the country died from an unknown illness. The new queen overthrew the crown princess and came to power, despite the opposition and the resistance. Now, the captain wanted to send a peace delegation to the Count's lands. In exchange for his acceptance, he planned to send Princess Pyre as a representative of the delegation. Although she is powerless against her stepmother, she is still first in line to the throne. Meanwhile, the Black Hood group was conducting suspicious experiments in the north of the kingdom. Fortunately, they did not have too many magic stones at their disposal. But the fact that one of the Black Hoods is now a prisoner is extremely valuable information. Hoping to get a whole castle of stones for this information, Garen and Garen hurried to Kraut. That time on the way to Kraut was difficult for Princess Pyre. She feared giving a bad impression of Mornon. If she did well in Kraut, the new queen promised to officially recognize her. Suddenly, the carriage stopped halfway, and the young woman began to worry that something was wrong. It turned out the servants planned to have lunch before entering Kraut and asked to wait a little. While the servant went to get lunch, Pyre walked away for a short stroll before eating. Everything was so desolate, as if they had gone hunting to prepare the food. Suddenly, she ran into her servants in the forest and decided to spy on their talk. But she never imagined they were planning the best moment to murder the princess. One wanted to put sleeping pills in her food, and the other must not fail and do it perfectly. Now the princess understood why she had been sent with that delegation. Happy as a fool to get out of there. She should have suspected they wouldn't let her go so easily. The only one who could lend her a hand was her uncle from Mornon. There was no escape, and the west was far away. The defenseless princess assumed she would die there. It turns out that, at first, the servants wanted to execute the plan after crossing the border. But the plan changed. The Crowd family sent knights to receive the princess. The desperate Pyre couldn't die like that, and fled to survive and cross the border. Everything turned out to be much more difficult than expected. The royal servants immediately went looking for the missing princess. In a moment full of desperation and helplessness, the young woman felt extremely weak. If she had known this would happen, she would have taken fencing classes. From trying so hard to escape, her feet were injured. She missed her mother very much. All she had left was to cross the coast to get to Kraut quickly. Just when Pyre decided not to waste time and move forward, the knights found her and attacked. Her stupid and helpless appearance made the knights laugh even more. They were determined to end the game. Before dying, the young woman begged them to at least tell her why the queen wanted to murder her. The truth is that the death of the princess will trigger a war. That death will be the fault of the Kraut County, starting a war by killing Pyre, the princess who hinders political affairs. That was the queen's objective. Seeing the glint of the sword before her eyes, the young woman closed them just before dying. But at that instant, an enemy arrow pierced the attacking knight's hand, who dropped his sword. It was, without a doubt, the great Cybri Kraut, defender of the kingdom and relentless fighter for justice. Seeing her only hope in his face, the poor princess ran to him, imploring his help. Help arrived instantly. Fortunately, Cybri noticed the terrible condition of the princess. From her clothing, he guessed that her attackers were knights from the kingdom of Mornon. However, those inhuman knights did not deserve to be called knights at all. In the end, the protector of the Kraut clan defeated 7 single-handedly, using only one sword. The knight said he was from the Kraut family, and up close he was simply incredible. He didn't strike vital organs, but apparently the knights had poison, as if everything was planned. Thanking the hero for saving her life, the girl introduced herself as Pyre. Realizing she was the Mornon kingdom's princess, Siberia understood how brazen the Mornon knights were. The knights wanted to kill their country's princess, but Cybri couldn't leave her alone. And defenseless, it might not be the most comfortable, but he asked her to wait until they reached Kraut. But the princess doubted whether she should go to Kraut, since a war might start because of her. Not wanting to hide the truth from her savior, Pyre revealed why the knights were trying to kill her. If she died on Kraut territory, the blame would fall on the county. The perfect excuse to start a war. Now that she had told the whole truth, Pyre felt much more relieved. The princess thought he would abandon her right there, but apparently he already expected something like this. But then he didn't understand why he didn't abandon her, if he understood she was the cause of the war. According to Cybri, if the princess hides, everyone will believe she disappeared on the border, and her family will be suspicious. Furthermore, the Lord clearly saw that assassins were waiting for her at the Mornon border. It was time for the princess to accept that she would not return to the kingdom. The enemy's plan succeeded since she left the palace. The situation is very complicated. The princess cannot return, hide, or flee to the west. Since every option leads to death, Siberia admitted he was taking her to the count's mansion. Not out of pity, it is more beneficial for the county to have the princess alive, rather than her dying or disappearing without a trace. Pyre was not sure if she would be useful to Kraut, but she decided to do everything in her power. Upon arriving at the camp, Kai immediately thought they were injured. Saibri kindly introduced the princess of the Mornon kingdom, to whom something happened on the way. He ordered Kai to treat her wounds and provide her with a place to rest. The nights were cold, so Lord Crowd left her a cloak and told her not to worry too much. At that moment, something stirred inside Pyre. She realized she had never asked for his name. That night, Roll finished reading, but he couldn't shake off a horrible sensation. Lately, thirst constantly torments him, but he couldn't understand why. However, he knew one thing for certain. She calms down as soon as he touches Ramilla. Before, the thirst calmed down just by the gentleman touching his hand, but since some time ago, that wasn't enough. Certainly, the thirst builds up, but looking at Ramilla, he felt much better. That's why Roll kept becoming so greedy. Happiness invades him, but he must control himself. He was too pleased. He had already lost everything 3 times. If happiness escapes him this time, he won't bear it. Without Ramilla, it was difficult. Lady Riera canceled the welcoming ceremony, just as her son requested. And now this suddenly happens. Ramilla unexpectedly noticed the presence of a guest in the Count's house, and she was surprised to see the young woman. Lady Piera wanted to explain everything, so they decided to talk in a more suitable place. According to her, the queen plans to use her as a pretext to start a war. Riera understood how tired the girl was, so she suggested discussing the course of action later. Now the protagonist was clear about what Mornian was plotting. This was not in the original story. This princess doesn't seem like a bad person, but something troubled Ramilla, feeling that the young woman had suffered a lot. It was like the role of the past. Leaving someone alone in such a situation is dangerous. In this situation, the best way to lower someone's guard is with tenderness. The next day, Carol carried out the order. The princess couldn't resist the tenderness of Miss Army and Master Lewin. At first, the princess refused to eat, but upon seeing the children throw a tantrum, she ran to the dining room. Just as Ramilla said, the princess didn't seem like a bad person. She was hardworking and kind, but Lady Pyre treated the maid with suspicion. She was extremely shy. According to the heroine, the reason might be in the political disputes of the Kingdom of Mornon. Ramilla's plan was to exhaust the princess with hard training, so she wouldn't have the strength to think. Upon meeting the princess, Saibri worried and thought, where do I begin this conversation? When he wanted to know about life in the castle, Pyre said the food was delicious. The room was beautiful, and everyone was very kind. She even met some adorable children who kept offering her food. Her objective was evident, but those little ones seemed so cute to her. However, Saibri came to find out if the princess would be interested in learning fencing. There are unforeseen events that force you to learn self-defense. Just in case, Pyre was not scared of extra work. She counted on Lord Kraut's help, so they decided to start training tomorrow, clearing their schedules. Meanwhile, in the Kingdom of Morno, everyone wondered if Pyre would achieve the mission. The queen, trusting the princess's talent, was sure of her success. At that moment, Jack, the interim coachman, burst in running and announced serious problems. The reason why she wasn't in the Kraut Kingdom was that the princess had been kidnapped. After murdering the knights, the descendant of the Krauts took the princess away without leaving witnesses. After hearing such news, it was clear they couldn't stand by idly. Making an urgent decision, the queen ordered everyone to prepare for war against the county of Kraut. Starting today, the princess will start training. And as Ramilla thought, nothing better than exercise. She was so genuine that Ruel just wanted to hug her and protect her from the cruel world. The protagonist begged Saibri to be the princess's teacher and teach her fencing. In training, Princess Pyre tried her best and completed all the exercises. Seeing the other knights, she understood that, indeed, they were preparing for war against Mornon. She even offered her help to avoid the imminent military confrontation, but since she doesn't understand politics, Saibri asked her to write a friendly letter. The recipient will be the Kingdom of Mornon, where she must tell everything that happened to her. The commoners are against the war, and the nobles who support the ex-queen will also oppose the chaos. If internal disputes consume the kingdom, the heroes will have an opportunity. Thinking about how to buy time, Pyre suggested writing to her uncle. Meanwhile, Fidel went to the forest and saw rare yellow ribbons on the trees. A little while ago, the count ordered him to take a letter to the Kingdom of Mornon. If the queen acted on the border, the count ordered him to retreat. Then find another route, but deliver the message to Jansu, west of Mornon. Just when Fidel hoped nothing bad would happen to him, an arrow grazed him. Near the border, he ran into the Knights of Mornon, determined to fight. Upon learning he was from the Kraut County, they attacked without hesitation. Fidel couldn't handle it alone. Even days later, Mornon was not receiving reinforcements from the southern region. The excuse from the southern region was that they didn't have enough soldiers. In the eastern region, they say the son is seriously ill. He has trouble moving. Thinking about it, everyone hated the new queen from the start. But Jan's was their main interest. The prince, the king's younger brother, and an experienced general leading the troops in the west. His niece, Pyre, was kidnapped, so he should have brought an army with him a long time ago. If the queen's plans are revealed, she will probably try to kill her. But even as a general, he wasn't smart enough. It turns out His Majesty is not well. A strong addiction to alcohol is to blame for everything. His condition is serious. A few days ago, he even vomited blood and fainted. Counting those from the border, the Kingdom of Mornon could send 12,000 soldiers right now. Even if they sent everyone they have, the army of the Kraut County outnumbers them 4 times. On the day of the battle, rumors reached the knights that the princess was under the count's protection. Everyone kept repeating it. Someone managed to spread such nonsense when war begins. Second knew that, in reality, the princess was receiving help from the count and about the queen's threats to get rid of her. So his partner considered that it didn't matter if the letter was fake or not. If the rumors that the princess is under the count's protection are true, the captain was not going to fight. As he thought, refusing to fight alongside the count, who protects the princess, cannot be called treason. Undoubtedly, Second believed that retreating without fulfilling the order could be considered treason. But even if it were so, he didn't think a war should be started. Suddenly, the princess arrived, accompanied by Count Kraut. Everything was over. The knights failed to act. First of all, Pyre confirmed the rumors that the queen had her in her sights. And the proof of it is Cybri, who saved her. If Lord Kraut hadn't arrived in time, the princess would already be dead. The army of Mornon thanked Cybri for rescuing the princess. It seemed the war was avoided. In that case, the captain took responsibility for returning the princess to the kingdom. Immediately, remembering her last day in the palace, Pyre did not want to return to a place where no one listened to her. Upon hearing this, Cybri decided to intervene. He believed they were sending the princess with the one who caused the war, although the priority is the princess's whereabouts. The count proposed discussing the objective of the visit first. Mornon has 2 options. First, secure the support of the Kraut County to overthrow Narbia. And second, resolve all issues peacefully, for the stability of the Kingdom of Mornon. The next day, at the Kraut barracks, Cybri reported that the enemies were planning to withdraw their troops. This was great joy, but it was not yet time to let down their guard for even a second. Just in case, Cybri decided to lead the reserve troops. As soon as he left the barracks, the princess followed him and proposed they go together. She considered that to be the perfect moment to thank the Lord once more for saving her. When the war ended, the girl could return to crowd and rest, but something inside her prevented it. In reality, Pyre wanted to stay there, close to her savior, Lord Cybri. Rumors that the princess visited the camp, accompanied by the Count of Kraut, reached Mornon. It became known that the princess participated, so the rumors were true. Assuming they were talking about her attempt to kill the princess, the queen couldn't believe that even the advisors believed these rumors. The lady believed that the princess might have lied. It is very likely that the County of Kraut is blackmailing her. If they don't start the war right now, they won't be able to repay the money loaned to the imperial family. Seeing that everyone doubted, the queen decided she didn't need such advisors. Just as she was about to get rid of everyone with the knight's hands, Lord Hyans burst into the hall. The rumors that he was vomiting blood were false. It was just ordinary wine. He expected the queen to guess why he arrived heavily armed. This was called treason. However, considering Queen Shin a traitor, Hyans ordered the knights to bring him. It seems the coachman, beaten almost to death and dragged here, was already known to His Majesty. As promised, under pressure, Jacques was forced to reveal that the queen ordered the assassination of the princess. And if nothing went well, blame the Kraut County for the assassination attempt. After everything said, the experienced general expected everyone present to have clearly heard this man's testimony, and he gave the order to arrest the queen for attempted assassination of the heir to the throne of the Kingdom of Mornon. In this way, carrying out Hayan's order, Narbia's reign came to an end. Upon meeting her uncle, Pyre told him everything that happened, from the adorable children to the beautiful Ramley. Lord Cybri also trained her in fencing, and she wanted to learn eagerly and show off her skills. Now that Hyans resolved everything in the kingdom, the queen who chose that path was over. As for Pyre's father, his condition remained the same, although he had even worsened a little. As the uncle declared, the king's daughter should ascend the throne, not that reckless woman. At 13 years old, Pyre was too young to take the throne, so the most sensible thing was to look for a new queen. Thinking about the future, Hayans offered her his help so she could take her place on the throne. However, the girl did not plan to return and asked her uncle to take her place on the throne. To be honest, she finds the royal palace repulsive. Since her mother died, that place stopped being her home. A father who destroys himself every day, and a little Pyre who needs him so much. Now she could only apologize for herself, the irresponsible princess and shameless niece. Finally realizing her lack of attention, Kyans allowed the girl to do as she wished. The letter arrived in time. Hayans ran with all his might after receiving the letter from his beloved niece. If he becomes king, future negotiations will be exhausting, but as long as Pyre was happy, there would be no problems. It was not a threat, but the request of an old friend to take care of his niece. Finally, it was time for the General of the West. Now Count Kraut could finally discharge the soldiers. It was rumored that Mornon's military plans had failed. That's why we shouldn't rush. Thinking about the next step in the case of the Kraut County, Antonia decided it was time to meet in person. Finally, the war was over. Now the heroes could rest in peace. However, Carol brought urgent news that Lord Cashin had arrived without prior notice. Not even Lord Royal knew that Sir Cashin was his wife's grandfather. Count Cashin is the protagonist's maternal grandfather. Their meeting was truly unexpected and long-awaited. Ramilla hadn't seen her grandpa for a long time. Cashin already met with Riera and Shale. His daughter scolded him for coming without notice. He heard about the impending war and arrived as a volunteer. But now he was glad everything was over. But since he was here, he decided to give the prepared gifts, congratulating his only granddaughter on her marriage. The reason he was lounging so calmly here was his sudden suspension from work. Lately, Count Cashin had started noticing oddities and investigated, finding the reason for his suspension. The budget, for some reason, was constantly leaking. After a long search, they were about to find the source of the problem. But at one moment, a group of people in black hoods appeared behind him. Fortunately, the Count is fine. He crushed them right there. But inexplicably, after the incident, he received the dismissal order. Ramilla was sure that something similar happened to Roll's cavalry order. Just as Cashin suspected, the budget was being diverted to weaponry. The amount of armor and weapons for the knights was growing at a frantic speed. After what happened, it seems the heroine suspected who was chasing Roll. Somehow, it is related to the military. Count Cashin was dismissed for investigating the army. Even so, Riera didn't understand how her daughter planned to overthrow the leadership without evidence. Furthermore, according to Shale, if it were that easy, grandfather would have done it. Because he knows perfectly well that there is nothing good about antagonizing the military leadership. Because that would mean the imperial family would become enemies with the Kraut County. The heroine managed to get close to her goal, but she was completely powerless. However, right now Roll hardly thought about that. After starting his new life in the Kraut County, he only thought about adapting quickly. Later, he focused on recovering his legs. In reality, his main task was to win his wife's favor. And afterwards, he thought about enjoying the peace surrounding him, not taking revenge. At that moment, Ramilla understood that she had only thought of herself, but she was doing it for him. However, she hid from Roll the concerns that tormented her deep in her heart. This made the master understand that she could be important to him and gave them a chance to get closer. Realizing the opportunity, Ramilla suddenly blurted out that they should pretend to be closer. Being a couple, the master approached without hesitation and kissed her cheek with a slight blush on his face. But it turned out his wife only wanted to hold hands, which greatly embarrassed Roll. While the heroine tried to explain that there was nothing embarrassing, the master had already fled. Despite everything, the girl was completely happy. Roll had kissed her in person. However, the master's feelings were very different. He seemed to reproach himself for the kiss. He thought he had acted recklessly, and now he didn't know how to look her in the face. Suddenly, a drawer full of books caught his attention. Books that appeared out of nowhere. Intrigued, Roll decided to read one, whose title was nothing less than Reproduction Diary. After reading a few lines, he closed the book in a panic. He considered it absolutely indecent. Roll, who had never read anything of that genre, was, let's say, in shock. Seeing more copies, the young man tensed, trying to figure out who left them in the library. But upon finding a bookmark with a name, he couldn't believe these books belonged to Ramilla. So she likes spicy novels. This will help Roll understand her tastes. All the men in the books were described as confident aristocrats, pure and elegant. Apparently, Ramilla likes handsome men, with fine and delicate features. Although Roll never considered himself attractive, he didn't even know how handsome he really was. But if he at least tries to resemble the heroes in those novels, he will feel much better about himself. At that moment, an unbreakable determination and a promise burned in the young man's heart. Ramilla, unaware of all this, was having fun telling her maid the latest news. When it was time for Cashin's departure, Rira begged him to give notice next time. As a farewell, she gave him a letter that she couldn't have given him before, or she would have gotten angry again. It was an invitation to the Imperial tournament. Everyone wanted to see the Count and Countess at that meeting. As provincial aristocrats, they could not participate, getting involved in political disputes. Cashin heard that on the day of the competition, the imperial family would present a powerful new weapon. Upon hearing this, Chalet decided that it could break the balance between the emperor and the nobility. His uncle obtained this information while investigating the army's corrupt plans. Roll was injured in a mysterious attack while conducting his own investigation. If we connect the dots, it is clear that the corruption in the army could be related to the new imperial weapon. The Count and Countess understood that Roll's misfortune could be the work of the emperor himself. Since this is the situation, Riera proposed that they uncover the truth about her brother-in-law together and go to the palace. That night, lying in bed, Roll decided to share his concerns with his wife. It turns out that lately, Ramilla has not stopped being a constant source of concern for him. However, the heroine only thought about the military. It was a total failure, an absolute disaster. Even on the third day of the seduction operation, the master failed miserably. He forgot something key. Trying to get closer, Roll told Ramilla he had something on his face, looking at her with loving eyes. But she thought it was remnants of the steak he had eaten. The girl doesn't get any hints. If the hero fails again today, he will have to give up. There will be no more chances. He was so nervous that he lost track of time and got into bed as soon as the sun set. Suddenly, Roll grabbed the edge of her neck and asked if she was hot, trying to be seductive. Even though it was almost winter, Ramilla suggested opening the window. As the gentleman said, there is no need to open the window. It is enough to unbutton a few buttons. The girl could not allow him to do that. She might catch a cold. She wrapped him up tighter, all for her own safety. After that, Ramilla ran out, without untying her husband. She almost lost her composure and lunged at him, so she decided to read a book. However, she suddenly realized that Roll's words had been heard before. The next day, as soon as the sun rose, the heroine attacked Carol, accusing her of being the one who told him. She accused the maid of telling her husband about those books. To understand everything, Ramilla told exactly what happened the night before. Roll was in the library yesterday. It is clear that he stumbled upon those books. The heroine understood. Her husband found the box she had shamelessly abandoned. He is not sure if she is the owner. He is provoking her on purpose. Carol loved that her master tried to be like the heroes in the book. But Ramilla does not want to be a wife who reads rubbish with her husband there. Roll entered and poof. Awkward silence filled the room. He brought an invitation from Lady Riera to join her for breakfast. The maid fled, she did not. Now she must ask, how much did you hear? Those murky books are the reason for her husband's murky behavior. She couldn't take it anymore and confessed. Yes, all those books belong to me. Holding her breath, Ramilla prepared to accept the master's disappointment. But Roll only explained his suspicions, which led him to pretend to be romantic. She expected a look of total disappointment upon realizing she owned those obscene books. The hero should not think for a second that he was disgusted by it. His acting was amazing. Now that the master knew her tastes, the lady wanted to know how he felt now. Like a deity, the Viscount felt excellent, as he discovered something new about his beloved. Romance was not an option, as the oddities happened again. During breakfast, Riera talked about the exhibition of new weapons at the tournament. Therefore, she sent Ramilla and Roll to see it right after breakfast. Since Roll visited the capital often, the girl asked him to recommend an interesting place to go. According to him, the capital is full of libraries, but if not, one can choose a museum or gallery. In reality, there is a place Lady would like to go with him. It is the heroine's favorite location, and thinking about it, it is Roll's favorite place. So much time has passed, and his old home hasn't changed at all. Seeing the guests at the door, The butler opened it for them and was happy to see that Lord Roll had recovered. It's hard to believe Jack has been here this whole time. It turned out that, after moving to the Crowd County, the heroine decided to buy his estate. Roll couldn't contain his gratitude upon learning that everyone who worked there before kept their positions. He was grateful because Ramilla kept a place so dear to him, and the people without whom he would feel lonely, because a place so dear to the hero will also be dear to his wife. Nothing has changed inside since her last visit. Absolutely nothing. A year ago, everything began here, when the goal seemed unattainable. Looking up, Roll wonders if his old mansion resembles his current home. Fortunately, the butler saved her from explanations by suddenly bringing hot tea. In this house, the hero met Lady Crowd, giving him hopes for a positive answer. Sighing heavily, he reproached himself for rejecting her proposal so abruptly. Since he had apologized before, Ramilla gave him a chance to make amends. Kneeling down, she knew it was unexpected, but she traveled to ask the gentleman to marry her. She had always admired Roll, so she gathered the courage to propose to him for the second time. A knight's sword in her hands, a symbol of sharing everything with her chosen one. It was an exceptional proposal, which the protagonist happily accepted. The proposal the girl made a year ago, she asked him to take it as a rehearsal. Just like the day he met Ramilla, the Viscount will remember this day forever. The perfect moment arrived. Now she and her husband could lock themselves in the mansion and have their honeymoon. However, against all plans, the Count and Countess arrived at the estate because they needed help. According to Chael, the princess will soon visit the capital. Most likely she is strengthening ties. In the original story, there was an episode with her appearance with her fiancé. She visited Roll several times during his illness. In the past, during her visits, even though Roll was already having a hard time, she only mocked his feelings. Afterwards, she fell back into depression, realizing he was left completely alone, without friends or family. But now the master has Ramilla and is no longer alone. Determined to show her affection openly, she wanted to succeed and repay him generously. The protagonist expected the princess any day to show her world-renowned love. The arrival of the Empire's princess and the first heir of the Beckwell house, Arian Beckwell. It was not long in coming. As the first heiress of the Crowd House, Ramilla welcomed the guests. How quickly Roll recovered seemed like a miracle to Antonia. She was sincerely happy. As soon as the princess started feeding Arian cookies, the protagonist remembered that this moment was in the original story. Slipping a cookie into Roll's mouth, Ramilla successfully repelled the attack. At one point, Antonia felt unwell, and talking to Arian, she mentioned that she had taken medicine. Unfolding all her acting talents, Ramilla fell to her knees before the master and said she felt unwell. At that moment, the evil stepmother appeared, very upset by what her daughter was doing in the presence of the princess. Shortly after, when Arian and Antonia left, he commented that Lady Crowd had been rude. This only amused the princess, as she knew that the Kraut family set aside formalities with their own. She had never witnessed anything like that between mother and daughter. Before leaving, Antonia took one last look at the mansion and felt a pang of envy. At that instant, in front of the main door, two members of the Black Hood gang ran past the princess. Looking back at the beautiful lady, one of them realized he had seen that face before. Removing their hoods, two young adventurers finally arrived with Lady Ramilly. They had come there because they had dug up useful information for the lady. According to what they found out, military clashes would begin in the north, and the heroine understood that they had been in those places. There is no relevant information for her in the north. Although if it is about the Black Hood, things change. It turns out they ran into a black-hooded man who wanted to burn the letter they were carrying. The note in the letter said that the executioner's body might not survive if the experiment gets out of control. Seeing this, Roll felt as if it wasn't the first time he had encountered something like this. Then, Ramilla suggested that his memories might be related to the day he lost his memory. Now, the puzzle pieces in his head finally began to fit together. Roll discovered the truth too quickly and was going to tell everyone. To silence him, these people orchestrated an accident with a fugitive knight and tried to kill him. But it didn't go as the instigators planned, and in the end, Roll lost his memory and mobility. Since the memory could return to the poor man at the worst moment, the black-hooded man put him under surveillance. According to Roll, if the experiment is prohibited, the instigators need to hide that it even exists. Suddenly, Jack reported that a count was looking for the master for a serious and personal reason. Upon meeting, Master Chael declared that this was the perfect season for grand events. After finishing his business in the capital, he wanted to propose, celebrating the wedding ceremony. After the meeting with the Count, Roll couldn't believe that he and Ramilla would actually be lovers after the wedding. He wanted to propose to her properly. Gathering courage, the master began to rehearse the speech he would give his fiancée. He was going to practice until those words sounded completely natural. Watching him from a distance, Ramilla didn't understand how he could be so charming. Damn adorable. A sinister laugh attracted Riera's attention, so the heroine almost died of a heart attack seeing her. Deciding that her daughter was behaving inappropriately, the lady ordered her and Roll to apologize to the princess. It was the famous capital cake, a delight that Milady's stomach approved of. Knowing that the imperial gardens are open, according to Riera, they say it's a perfect place for dates. Upon arriving, the protagonist couldn't contain her astonishment upon seeing what the imperial palace was like. She was going to deliver the cake, but as the princess sat down, they asked the guests to wait outside. Before the princess arrived, the heroes decided to admire the garden, and Ramilla restrained herself from eating the cake. Everything around made a pleasant impression on the girl. The garden looked so large and spacious, but in reality, the beauty was in Roll's eyes. His wife's blue hair reminded him of the clear sky. Seeing her sweet eyes looking at him, the heroine suspected he wanted to confess something. By saying Ramilla's hair reminds him of the sky, Roll thought about how beautifully it shone in the sun. At those words, the girl almost went blind and passed away. Her husband spoke and seemed like innocence itself, but honestly, she was embarrassed to fantasize about doing very dirty things with him. Her innocent husband hoped she would forgive him if he confessed to thinking about dirty things much more than she did. Upon hearing that, Ramilla felt like she had arrived in paradise, not the imperial palace. The loud tapping of a cane brought her back to life. The princess was returning to the palace. Suddenly, her legs faltered. Antonia dropped her cane and collapsed onto the cold floor. Upon waking up, Ramilla thought the doctor should stay in her rooms because of what happened. However, after fainting, the princess asked them not to worry, taking care of herself after the celebration. The protagonist said that only because she truly felt uneasy. As a gift, she brought a strawberry and chocolate cake with whipped cream from the capital pastry shop. Only upon hearing the word chocolate did Antonia horrify, but upon learning it was a gift from the countess, she ate. After a small piece of cake, the princess finally gave a smile to her guests. She had already laughed a lot at Ramilla the last time, when her mother pinched her cheeks. Suddenly, a maid brought an order from the emperor. His Majesty wished to see his daughter. With this, their meeting ended. Lady Ramilla and Lord Roll left the imperial palace, but it was still strange that everyone reacted so calmly to the fainting of the empire's princess. Thinking about it, the heroine realized it was true, and that there weren't as many servants in the palace as she thought. Perhaps there is a weighty reason why there are so few people around the princess. Upon calling his daughter, His Majesty the Emperor already knew that she had met with people from the Kraut County. When he found out they were just eating cake, he decided to find out why. However, the Lord didn't want details and only hoped that she and Arian were well. He considered him a key pawn for connecting with the aristocracy, unforgivable to let him escape. Her father demanded Antonia ensure they both served a purpose tomorrow. She longed for him to call her out of concern this time, but everything was routine. That night, the imperial princess wished, once again, to go up the tower to contemplate the night landscape with her mother. Her mother lay there, in the darkness of the night, like an angel in the most difficult moments. Antonia couldn't help but smile remembering that girl. She mentioned that Ramil briefly visited and rescued her when the princess fainted. She had never seen a noble lady drooling over a cake. Upon hearing that the young woman had lost consciousness, Arian became distressed about her condition. Then, the princess reproached him that he shouldn't have left alone and returned so late. The first heir left because there were problems in the laboratory, and His Majesty moved the council without notice. Recalling the county, the princess decided to ask what Arian thought Roll would do. According to the gentleman, even the Viscount would start having doubts. He wouldn't act without proof. And if he remembers everything completely, even so, the power of the imperial family will terrify him. He won't take the first step. The next day, on the day of the imperial council, His Imperial Majesty appeared before the guests. Today he had to show them a new weapon. That's why he had gathered them all so early. Ramilla waited a long time for this moment. With the hustle and bustle, she couldn't even go to the bathroom. However, among the aristocrats gathered in the palace, she didn't see the princess anywhere. Soon the hall doors opened, and a bright light let in several members of the Black Hood group. The heroine knew the imperial family was colluding with them, but she didn't think they deserved such publicity. They are those recruits the emperor spoke of, and he will show why they are worthy. At that instant, something unthinkable happens. The gentleman plunges a sharp sword into a recruit, but asks the guests not to be afraid, since the young man is completely fine and healthy. These guys are invulnerable, an army of immortals, with magic crystals embedded in their bodies. Whispers are heard in the crowd. People are scared, just thinking that he implanted crystals in corpses. The most terrifying thing is that, apparently, Roll understood why the laboratory was in the north during the war. Perhaps they needed the bodies of fallen soldiers, which is why they settled in the combat zone. When the guests calmed down, it was time for the real show, revealing their power in battle. At that moment, a member of the Black Hood group pierces the emperor with a sword. No one will be able to oppose the great empire. The lord felt a sharp pain inside, realizing that the situation was critical for him. He simply couldn't understand how Antonia, his own daughter, could do such a thing. In Antonia's youth, the emperor, her father, was always very strict with the little one. The young woman was sure it was all for her own good, for educational purposes. She thought so until she found her late mother's diary. On March 1st of year 27, her mother became an orphan. Marquis Roger took her into his family, and her surname from now on would be Roger. On April 8th, the Marquis allowed her to call him by his name. It was a wonderful day. Judging by the notes, Antonia realized it was her late mother's diary. On May 3rd of year 38, the lady met Rastin at a ball. Their first encounter flew by. On February 8th of year 39, His Majesty spoke about the death of the now-deceased emperor. From the diary, Antonia discovered that her mom and dad lost their parents because of the invaders. She thought that if it still hurt mom, how much must her father have suffered? On August 9th of 39, Rastin proposed to her, and she felt an icy chill. Midsummer, on December 28th, the wedding day, her father fell to his knees, terror on his face, whispering that his blood was swine. That revealed to the frightened princess the reason why her father looked at her with such contempt. On November 24th of 40, Antonia was born. On March 4th of 42, His Majesty was informed of his wife's origin. From June 8th, Rastin stopped looking for her. On October 10th of 43, a servant of the emperor officially announced that the lady would never appear in public again. On September 5th of 44, Antonia said she feared the snow, deeply moving the lady's heart. On January 1st of 47, His Majesty finally appeared and handed her some documents. It spoke of experiments to awaken the Beastmen gene. On February 2nd, the lady feared participating in the experiment, but her husband threatened their daughter's safety. On February 15th, Antonia, in exchange for her coronation, her mother agreed to participate in the experiment. From June 2nd, the woman couldn't distinguish sleep from reality. She understood speech poorly and spat blood. On February 5th of the following year, she lied to the emperor and failed. Antonia was not supposed to know anything. On February 8th, the mother wrote that Antonia loved desserts, hoping to stay with her for a month. The lady only wanted to stay close. This was the last entry in Antonia's mother's diary. Looking at her cold body, the young woman hoped her mother wanted to tell her something, or entrust her with some task, anything just to make her feel better. At that moment, the princess felt the tender touch of her mother on her face, drying her tears. It seemed to be that awakening, that moment, and Antonia was smiling, feeling her mother's touch. She would definitely take revenge, using the inherited skills of her mother. The day of the Imperial Council witnessed a true betrayal. The emperor fell to his knees, helpless. What happened was not by chance. The attack was too precise to be a spontaneous outburst. After gathering the group members, one of them asked all the guests to remain in their places. He warned that if they moved even a centimeter, they would die. Now, those whose names were called were asked to gather in the center of the hall. Those people supported the overthrow of the deceased empress. The immortal warrior asked people to pay attention to the letters, which contained proof of support for the overthrow of the deceased empress. Those whose names were not mentioned, the group members asked them to leave. At that moment, Count Rainier joined the sinners. He wasn't going to run away like a coward. Since the group planned to eliminate him, the entire Rainier family challenged them to try. The immortal thought that those worms didn't deserve protection. They should die by his hands. Believing they deserved what was coming to them, Count Rainier ordered his daughter and Roll to flee immediately, because even if they suppressed the rebellion, it wouldn't matter if the ringleader escaped. The heroine and her husband immediately fled the hall, and in the corridor, bumped into a hooded man. It turned out that Arjun was not only not going to say where the princess was, but he was her accomplice. Since they didn't know the princess's next move, Roll took the reins and ordered his wife to move forward. Surprisingly, Aryan revealed that the princess was at the top of the stairs at the end of the corridor. He warned Ramelais to be careful, as the princess was stronger than she looked. He wasn't lying. Is the princess really dangerous? The heroine must find out. He left the rest to Roll. As a participant in the rebellion, Aryan didn't need a reason to fight for the truth. In the end, Roll also follows his beloved and directs his sword against the imperial family. However, for the gentleman himself, this was incorrect. He apologized by saying his name was Roll Crowd. Meanwhile, Ramilla reached the tower and burst into the room, ordering the princess to surrender. And keep silent, she froze at the door upon seeing the empress, supposedly dead, in front of her. Seated, it seemed like she had simply fallen asleep, but according to Antonia, her mother is dead from the side effects of human experiments. In the novel, not only the protagonist Roll, but also the supporting characters have their painful stories. The princess's pain, caused by the father she killed, was understandable, but Ramilla was only interested in to what extent she had contributed to Roll's suffering. As soon as Antonia smiled maliciously, it became clear who orchestrated that unfortunate accident. They eliminated those who discovered the experiments. So Roll was lucky to lose his memory and mobility. The heroine did not expect to hear that her husband would pass away instantly if he remembered anything. The princess decided to visit him earlier to find out if he remembered anything and decide what to do with him afterward. During her visit, Antonia interrogated him, seeking to confirm that Roll's condition was still the same. And then he married Lady Ramilla, and everything went wrong. The war ended without even starting. Accepting her imminent death, the princess decided to reveal everything about her plans and intentions. Knowing that the magic stone couldn't animate such a corpse, Ramilla thought they had recruited the mage. At that instant, Antonia revealed her true form as an awakened human beast. Those people devoured her power. Awakening is born from an intense desire, linked to something, which transforms into an ability. This means the Empire's princess has the power to control corpses. Since her life was hard, Ramilla offered her the chance to simply surrender. Suddenly, Antonia bit a magic stone, a large mana catalyst. Upon absorbing it, a normal person would only feel pain, but the princess caused a mana overload. Feeling the first blow from her opponent, the heroine thought she might never see her husband again. As the princess declared, no matter how strong the Crowd clan is, only a human can defeat another human. Before attacking with a furious accumulation of mana in her sword, Ramilla asked why she was so sure. Seeing the bloody wounds on her body from the powerful blow, Antonia knew her opponent wasn't lying. At the most critical moment, a crash was heard, and relieved, Lord Roll burst into the room. Seeing him, the princess collapsed and demanded to know what had happened to Aryan. Upon hearing that Roll had only stunned him, she felt immense relief. With the sword at her throat, the imperial princess knew time was running out. Now it was 2 against her, so they offered her to surrender and end the farce. Determined to die, the young woman gripped her weapon tightly, wishing to end it all. Throwing the sword at her neck with fury, she asked Ramelais to avenge her husband's pain. At that instant, Antonia felt a warm breath on her back and saw her mother's kind face. As if alive, but petrified, the deceased empress begged them not to kill her daughter. The heroine hesitated between thinking she was a controlled corpse and begging for the child's life. Shortly after, Roll reassured his wife, telling her that both of them had fled the castle. The hooded figures were no longer moving. Finally, everything was over. Lady Kraut promised that she would no longer indulge in such gloomy deeds. The girl's eyes filled with tears, a great mystery that Roll longed to solve. Ramilla didn't know if she reached that conclusion out of pity, even though the princess was the one who harmed Roll. Everything was fine, as the gentleman was safe thanks to his wife, because even if someone else had wielded the sword, he would have acted the same upon waking up. After the princess lost consciousness, her mother turned to ashes and vanished. She left with relief in her eyes, grateful that they saved her daughter. Unaware of what the princess thought looking at the sky, Ramilla enjoyed the silence and the beauty of the sky. Then, she suggested taking advantage of the moment and doing it right there, referring to the confession. However, Roll remembered that he left the confession script on the table and suggested leaving it for home. The protagonist didn't understand what worried him so much, since 3 words were enough for her. At that moment, the Viscount confessed his feelings. He was sincere when kissing the lady's hand. Due to the whim of fate that united those 2 hearts, he dedicated the rest of his life to Lady Ramel. It seems that all the heroine's lustful and impossible dreams came true, as she clung passionately to his lips. In all the time they spent together, she admitted for the first time that she loved him too. This time, Roll wanted to be the first, kissing his beloved. Now they could do it wherever they wanted. On their wedding day, the children ran around the mansion. Army mentioned that she had seen the preparations. She decided to do a report for her little brother and asked him what he thought of the wedding. In reality, the gentleman's heart was beating uncontrollably. He was very nervous. However, he was grateful to his sister for always being by his side. The ceremony is about to begin, and Army ran to the hall, wiping away happy tears. Meanwhile, in the bride's room, Roll was lying on the floor in her dress. Sleepless all night and not knowing what to do, only little Army could lift her. She came to see her and find out how she felt before the wedding. Ramel only had to convince her parents to approve the law prohibiting divorce. As the ceremony was about to begin, Carol took the girl to the hall and she said goodbye to her sister. On this wonderful day, surrounded by their loved ones, everything whispered love, uniting 2 hearts in marriage. Everyone was nervous, but the main problem is that the bride hadn't appeared yet. Furious, Count Kraut thought she had fled the wedding, but Riera tried to convince him otherwise. Finally, Ramilla appeared in the hall, late for the ceremony, looking like she had fallen asleep. After greeting the lovers, Orm asked them to approach the wedding altar along the flower-covered path. The protagonist was ready to follow the path of flowers and invited Ramilia to accompany him.